Chapter 993. Under Lu Tianling's persuasion, celestial phenomenon Lao Tzu finally gave up on the idea of going to the Tsenghai sect. Instead, he personally replaced Lu Tianling to guard the fire vein seal. With celestial phenomenon Lao Tzu personally guarding the fire vein seal, unless Dao Xing Lao Tzu came, no one in the North Sea would dare to provoke him. The fire vein seal was naturally safe. Lu Tianling and spiritual master Xianwei, who had also been fed a bell cauldron pill, were sent back to Tianling Mountain. Gui Tianshan Lao Tzu of Frost Island had been urgently recalled. Tian Fan and Tian Shui had also gathered the first batch of Jinling's core forging adepts, as well as a batch of non-fire element alchemists and craftsmen who had reached the core forging stage. They could rush to the Northwest Sea at any time, and the two of them were already heading there. After Lu Tianling returned to Tianling Mountain, the sect-protecting formation was fully activated. At the same time, a summons from the sect leader was issued. The entire Jinling was on its way back from the Central Plains. Tian Feng Lao Tzu was already on his way back from the Central Plains. Later, Lu Tianling, in the name of the Jinling sect leader, sent out a summons to the entire North Sea training world. He told the entire North Sea that Zhang Shi had previously assassinated the Jinling sect leader and attempted to murder several Dharma adepts of Jinling. He also said that if the Tsenghai sect did not give an explanation, the entire Jinling sect would not hesitate to fight with the Tsenghai sect. At the same time, he also spread the news that the volcanoes in the Northwest Sea were about to erupt to the entire North Sea training world. He invited the entire North Sea training world to go to the Northwest Sea to capture the heaven and earth spirit fire that might appear on a large scale. At the same time, the entire North Sea training world, which had originally been skeptical about the news from the Tsenghai sect, had no more doubts after receiving the summons from the Jinling sect leader. They immediately began to move. There were crisscrossing lights flashing above the various sections. Many Dharma adepts had already gone to the Northwest Sea. However, the remaining cultivators still needed to be mobilized and were already far behind the Jinling cultivators who were on standby on Floating Island. As for the matter of Zhang Shi assassinating Lu Tianling and plotting to kill Jinling and several Lao Tzus, this Zhang Shi really dared to do it. Why didn't he succeed? But what does this matter have to do with my sect? I'll just watch the show from the side. But I still have to talk about morality. When the time comes, I'll inevitably criticize the Blue Sea sect, but in reality, I'll just remain neutral. Lao Tzu's thoughts were basically the same, but perhaps Jinling wanted this kind of attitude from the various sections. As long as he stood on the moral high ground, suppressing the Azure Sea sect would become a matter of course. At this moment, Lu Ping and the others had once again returned to the volcanic cluster. Everyone flew across the vast volcanic cluster, seizing the time to search for traces of volcanoes that might erupt. Clearly, they were pressed for time. Lu Ping looked at the huge mountain in front of him that had stopped erupting, but was still constantly rising. He turned to Lu Qiner and said, "Qiner, you go take a look at other places. After 4 hours, regardless of whether you find anything or not, immediately withdraw from this sea area." After Lu Ping said that, he took out the Na Chuan cauldron. The Na Chuan cauldron grew to a height of 3 meters in midair. Lu Ping jumped into the cauldron and fell towards the crater of the volcano. As the Na Chuan cauldron fell, although Lu Ping's body was inside the Na Chuan cauldron, he could still feel the surrounding temperature rising. It was as if his whole body had fallen into a heated pot. Lu Ping tried his best to control the speed of the Na Chuan cauldron's fall. At the same time, he also had to help the Na Chuan cauldron resist the surrounding scorching temperature. Although Lu Ping's water attribute Jinyuan had a great effect in resisting the high temperature of the surrounding magma, the Jinyuan around his body was being consumed at an extremely fast speed. This was because Lu Ping had not yet fallen into the magma of the crater of the volcano. If he fell in, no matter how vigorous the Jinyuan around Lu Ping's body was, it was unknown whether he could last for a long time. Therefore, Lu Ping had to find the spiritual fire hidden in the magma in the shortest time possible. Plop! With a muffled sound, Lu Ping felt that the entire Na Chuan cauldron suddenly began to float up and down. The surrounding temperature of the cauldron walls rose again. Lu Ping could clearly feel that the consumption of his Jinyuan had suddenly increased. Lu Ping knew that he had fallen into the magma of the volcano. Lu Ping's divine sense quickly overflowed and extended in all directions. He even tried his best to explore the depths of the magma in an attempt to find traces of the spiritual fire. However, he found nothing. Lu Ping stretched out his hand and patted the wall of the Na Chuan cauldron. A purple-blue Jinyuan was injected into the Na Chuan cauldron. The originally continuously rising temperature was immediately alleviated. Lu Ping stamped his feet, and the Na Chuan cauldron immediately sank dozens of feet into the magma. Lu Ping's divine sense seemed to have captured something. He hurriedly controlled the Na Chuan cauldron to chase after it. However, he discovered that there was a fist-sized fiery red bead looming in the magma. This bead was naturally not the heaven and earth's spiritual fire. However, what exactly was it? Lu Ping's current knowledge could be said to be broad. However, he did not know what this bead was. However, to be able to exist in this high-temperature magma, this bead itself could be considered a kind of treasure. Lu Ping tried his best to control his divine sense to bind this bead. Then, a dense Jinyuan exploded from the mouth of the Na Chuan cauldron. It opened up a small space at the mouth of the cauldron. The Na Chuan cauldron quickly opened up and absorbed the bead into the alchemy furnace. Lu Ping held the bead in his hand and carefully examined it. However, apart from being able to sense that this bead contained a large amount of fire attribute energy, he still could not figure out the use of this bead. The Na Chuan cauldron continued to appear in the magma. Fortunately, the quality of the Na Chuan cauldron was high enough. In addition, Lu Ping's water attribute Jinyuan happened to be able to restrain the fire attribute of the magma. Moreover, Lu Ping's Jinyuan was also vigorous enough. Therefore, he was able to last until now. In the blink of an eye, more than 2 hours had passed. There was only 1 hour left from the 4 hours. However, Lu Ping still had no clue about the trace of the spiritual fire. However, Lu Ping did not gain nothing during this period of time. At least, Lu Ping could sense that after he continuously poured his Jinyuan into the Na Chuan cauldron, under the endless high temperature of the magma around the Na Chuan cauldron, some impurities that he had never discovered before were slowly being purified. The quality of the Na Chuan cauldron also seemed to be improving at a slow speed. Just as the Na Chuan cauldron began to slowly turn red under the scorching magma, under Lu Ping's surprised gaze, a picture slowly began to appear on the inner wall of the Na Chuan cauldron. It became clearer and clearer. Lu Ping's face was frequently intertwined with surprise and shock. In the end, he slowly restrained all his emotions. At this moment, Lu Ping's divine sense, which was scattered in the depths of the magma, suddenly felt a sharp pain. This pain was exactly the same as the feeling of being burned by the flame. Originally, although Lu Ping's divine sense was greatly affected in the magma, this influence ultimately only hindered the range of the divine sense's exploration. The magma itself did little harm to Lu Ping's divine sense. Something that could hurt Lu Ping's divine sense, even if it was not the spiritual fire, was probably some kind of rare treasure. It was enough for Lu Ping to make up his mind to explore it. Lu Ping drove the Jinyuan in his body, and the Na Chuan cauldron sank another 100 feet. The consumption of the Jinyuan in his body was even more intense. The pure yang pearl in the core space could not be bothered to play around. It spat out a mouthful of origin qi, and the Jinyuan in Lu Ping's bloodline, which was about to be exhausted, suddenly came to life. Lu Ping's divine sense stretched out towards the depths of the magma, and finally captured the thing that could burn Lu Ping's divine sense. Lu Ping's divine sense once again felt like it was being burned. Lu Ping's eyes suddenly lit up. This time, Lu Ping would rather endure the pain of the burning and try his best to wrap his divine sense around this thing. It really was a spiritual fire. It was actually this thing. There were several kinds of heaven and earth spiritual fires that could cause damage to divine sense. However, due to the different grades of the fire, the damage to the cultivator's divine sense also varied. However, if one were to ask what kind of spiritual fire could cause the most damage to the cultivator's divine sense, it would undoubtedly be the jade phosphorus soul fire. A high-grade heaven and earth spiritual fire. At this time, Lu Ping could no longer describe his good luck. In a volcano, he had actually found the 4-inch spiritual flame and the jade phosphorus soul fire, two extremely special spiritual fires. If this were to spread out, it was unknown how many cultivators would be envious of him. Originally, with Lu Ping's current cultivation and status, besides the heaven and earth spiritual fire needed for alchemy, most of the spiritual objects in the world were no longer of special importance to him. After all, these spiritual objects no longer had a decisive impact on the cultivator. However, for an alchemist, the 4-inch spiritual flame was one of the few flames that could arouse the interest of Lu Ping. Similarly, for a cultivator who attached great importance to the battle of divine sense, the jade phosphorus soul fire was also a kind of spiritual object that was highly valued. The uniqueness of the jade phosphorus soul fire was that it was extremely harmful to the divine sense of a cultivator. This made the jade phosphorus soul fire the best weapon for the divine sense of a cultivator. Regardless of whether it was for attack or defense, the power displayed by the jade phosphorus soul fire made all the cultivators who relied on divine sense wary of using it. Lu Ping's divine sense was already different from ordinary people. If he could refine the jade phosphorus soul fire into his divine sense, Lu Ping was confident that even a Dharma adept would not be able to hurt him in a battle of divine sense. He had to get his hands on this item. Lu Ping had an expression of throwing caution to the wind. With a sudden stomp of his feet, the Na Chuan cauldron sank again. At this time, it was already more than 100 feet deep in the magma. Even though the Na Chuan cauldron was of high quality, it had already been burned red. Lu Ping, who was in the cauldron, was sweating profusely. The heaven flower water curtain that was propped up to protect his body had already been burnt by the high temperature layer by layer. Meanwhile, Lu Ping's inner yuan was continuously being injected into it, supporting the heaven flower water curtain layer by layer. "It's here!" Lu Ping suddenly opened the Na Chuan cauldron. 12 gentian pearls shot out from the cauldron. A white light shot out from a white lotus that flashed behind Lu Ping. It immediately hit the seemingly illusory flame. Then, the gentian pearls surrounded the flame. Ling Long was in the depths of the wine cauldron. The Na Chuan cauldron sucked in the air, and then quickly retreated back into the Tao cauldron. The jade phosphorus soul fire finally couldn't hold on any longer, and was absorbed into the Na Chuan cauldron. Lu Ping didn't have time to check on the flame that was colliding around in the Na Chuan cauldron. The Na Chuan cauldron shook and quickly shot towards the surface of the magma in the crater. Chapter 994. At the same time, in the sky above the Northwest Sea, there were already dozens of Dharma power Laozu gathered in the sky above the fire vein that celestial phenomenon Laozu was guarding. However, none of the Laozu from the various sects rushed to the bottom of the sea to search for the heaven and earth spirit fire. Instead, they waited quietly on the surface of the sea, as if waiting for one of the sects to come forward and negotiate with celestial phenomenon Laozu. It was not that they could not enter the underwater volcanoes, but after what had happened to Zhangxi, many of the Laozu had each learned their lesson. If the seal of the fire vein was broken, it would naturally be possible to bury the Zhenling Dharma adept who was currently searching for the heaven and earth spirit fire in the volcanoes. However, at this time, with celestial phenomenon around, naturally no one had any ideas about the fire vein. However, what if after others entered the underwater volcanoes, Zhenling suddenly withdrew and then activated the heaven and earth spirit fire? A breeze suddenly swirled on the quiet sea, and Dao Xing Laozu suddenly appeared in front of all the Dharma adepts. "Greetings, my friend Dao Xing! Greetings, Senior Dao Xing!" Dozens of Dharma adepts bowed together, showing the status of Dao Xing Laozu in the North Sea. Although Zhenling had become the #1 sect in the North Sea, and Celestial Phenomenon Laozu was also the only 2 Dharma adepts in the North Sea, and Xianling sect was now declining, Dao Xing Laozu's reputation as the #1 person in the North Sea had not been affected in the slightest. Even if Celestial Phenomenon Laozu became a Dharma adept, it still could not shake Dao Xinglaozu's position in the North Sea. Dao Xinglaozu's prestige was not because of his own cultivation, but because he had killed his way out of the deep-sea demon region. Over the past hundreds of years, Dao Xinglaozu had always been the backbone of the human clan in resisting the attacks of the demon clan. In several one-on-one battles, he had defeated two great cultivators of the primordial giant crocodile clan. Dao Xinglaozu lightly nodded his head at the crowd. After that, his silhouette flickered as he disappeared from the surface of the sea. At the location where the fire vein was sealed, Tian Xianglaozu sensed something. He abruptly raised his head and saw a spatial rift opening up in the sea several tens of feet in front of him. Dao Xinglaozu stepped out from within. "Brother Tian Xiang, your sect has taken the lead again. Don't let the other fellow Taoists wait for too long." Celestial Phenomenon Laozi smiled. "Sure." After saying that, he waved his hand, and a few golden lights disappeared in a flash. He then turned around and said, "In the time it takes for an incense to burn, the old man will open the seal of the fire vein and lead it to Tianling Mountain." Looking at the pure and powerful fire vein under Tian Xianglaozu's feet, even someone like Dao Xinglaozu could not help but feel a trace of jealousy in his eyes. "Brother Tian Xiang is really lucky," Tian Xianglaozu said with a hint of pride. "It's just luck. No one expected that after mining a small mineral vein, a fire vein would be drawn out." Outside the tall volcano more than 100 miles away, Lu Qiner anxiously circled around the top of the volcano. She had been holding a jade slip in her hand for 15 minutes. The 4 hours were getting closer and closer, but Lu Ping still had not come out of the crater. The underwater mountain was only a few thousand feet away from the surface. Once the fire vein's seal was undone, the entire volcano chain would erupt. At that time, Lu Ping wouldn't even have a chance to escape from the crater of the volcano. Just as Lu Qiner was hesitating whether to land on the edge of the crater to take a look, a muffled sound came from the magma in the crater. Lu Qiner's first reaction was that the volcano was about to erupt, because it was already the 4-hour mark. She was about to escape with the waterproof pearl, but then she thought that if this was the case, the movement of the volcanic eruption would not be so small. Then, there was only one possibility. Lu Qiner was overjoyed. When she turned around, she saw Lu Ping coming out of the Na Chuan cauldron, his entire body looking like it was being boiled. The cauldron itself looked like it was being quenched, causing the seawater around it to sizzle. Even when Lu Ping put the cauldron back into his interspatial mystic artifact, the temperature still didn't drop. "Brother, let's go. The 4 hours are almost up. Tian Xianglaozu has already sent a communication jade slip." Compared to whether Lu Ping had obtained the spiritual fire in the volcano, Lu Qiner was obviously more concerned about Lu Ping's safety. After seeing that there were no injuries on Lu Ping's body, she handed over the jade slip she had received earlier to Lu Ping. Lu Ping was shocked. He did not care about the loss of the inner yuan in his body due to the volcanic magma. He directly put Lu Qiner into the golden house, and then turned into a stream of water and fled to the area where the fire vein was sealed. Tian Xianglaozu was guarding the fire vein. Tian Fan, Tian Shui, Tian Lu, Tian Jiang, Tian Qin, and Tian Qing, 6 Dharma adepts stood behind Tian Xianglaozu. In front of him, there were more than 10 Dharma adepts from various sects led by Dao Xinglaozu. "Brother Tian Xiang, the time has passed. Don't let the various sects cultivators wait too long." Dao Xinglaozu was silent for a moment, and finally spoke up to urge Tian Xiang. Tian Xianglaozu opened his eyes slightly and said, "There is still one person from our sect who has not returned yet. Please wait for a moment, Brother Dao Xing. That Lu Tianping has not appeared yet." Could it be that he has already fallen in the volcano? Behind Dao Xinglaozu, Feng Shidao could not help but speak sarcastically. As soon as he said this, the 7 Dharma adepts on Zhiling's side were all angered. The aura of the 7 Dharma adepts came crashing down on Feng Shidao. Even Dao Xinglaozu did not dare to face it head-on. Feng Shidao was even forced back by the aura, and he almost fell to the ground on his butt to embarrass himself. His face was already red from holding back. 2 mid-Dharma adepts suddenly appeared in the depths of the sea. The two of them attacked at the same time, and together with Dao Xing Laozu, they finally managed to temporarily weaken the aura of Jinling's side. Feng Shidao was able to catch his breath, and at the same time, he raised his own aura again, intending to join the battle. These 2 mid-Dharma adepts who had just appeared and dared to join the conflict between Dao Jinling and Xianling's sect were not strangers. One of them was Dong Yi Laozu of the Vast Sea sect, while the other shocked many of the Dharma adepts. It was the easternmost Laozu, who had long announced that he would soon break through to the mid-Dharma stage and become a great adept. However, at this time, the easternmost Laozu's aura was overflowing, and everyone could already sense that he had not entered the late Dharma stage. He was still at the mid-Dharma stage, but it was obvious that he had reached the peak of the mid-Dharma stage. The rumor that he was about to become the third great adept in the North Sea training world was not groundless after all. Seeing this, Dao Yan and Lin Xuqing also hurriedly joined the battle. Dao Xing Laozu and the easternmost Laozu's side immediately turned the tables. However, with the cooperation of the 2 Laozus, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, Jinling's side was still able to maintain a balance with the 2 sections. Right at this time, the spatial door at the bottom of the sea opened up again. Dong Gue and the 2 Vast Sea sect cultivators from the East Lake sect rushed over as well. One of them was at the mid-Dharma stage, while the other was at the early Dharma stage. After the 2 of them joined the battle, the tables were turned once again, and Jinling's side was now at a complete disadvantage. Just as the seal on the fire vein was about to be broken by the Dharma adepts of the Xianling and Vast Sea sect, a long whistle suddenly rang out. The faces of Jinling and the other Dharma adepts lit up with joy. A divine will that was as sharp as a flying sword slashed towards them. However, this divine will seemed to contain a burning sensation that made one's heart palpitate. Dong Gue and the 2 Laozus from the East Lake sect clutched their heads and cried out in pain. Sweat dripped down their foreheads as they hurriedly retreated. Lu Ping had captured the jade phosphorus soulfire. Although he had yet to fully refine it, he could already make use of it with his immense spiritual will. Although Lu Ping had relied on his powerful divine will to launch that sudden attack just now, the jade phosphorus soulfire's burning effect on the divine will had also caused Dong Gue and the East Lake sect to be badly frightened. This cry caused the 3 Laozus from the 3 sects to let go of each other. This was because Lu Ping's figure had already appeared at the place where the Jinling Dharma adepts were at the fire vein seal. At this time, Lu Ping looked rather haggard. The huge loss of his inner yuan had caused Lu Ping's face to look rather pale. However, when they thought about the incredible power that Lu Ping had displayed previously, the dozens of Dharma adepts at the bottom of the sea did not dare to laugh out loud or make fun of him. When Celestial Phenomenon Laozu saw that Lu Ping had returned unscathed, he smiled and said, "How are you? Do you need some time to recover?" Lu Ping shook his head and said, "There's no need." "That's good. My friends, please wait on the surface of the sea. After the old man removes the fire vein seal, the volcanoes will go out of control and explode. The commotion will be huge, and the danger will be even higher." After saying that, the Jinling Dharma adepts had already taken the lead and floated to the surface of the sea. Although the other adepts were a little hesitant, when they saw that the Jinling Dharma adepts had left, Dao Xing, Dao Yan, Dong Ji, Dong Yi, and the others had also left, they too started to leave. There were a few who were slower and happened to see Celestial Phenomenon Laozu remove the fire vein seal. The formation that perfected Xianwei had already set up was instantly activated, and the entire fire vein began to sink into the sea. When he reappeared, he would probably already be on Tianling Mountain. The pure fire vein contained a strong power, and the few Dharma adepts who were the last to leave looked on with envy. However, just as the fire vein was being guided, the entire sea began to shake violently. The turbulence that had occurred in the Northwest Sea previously was like a child's play compared to this. The few Dharma adepts could not even stand firm, and in an instant, they were all sent flying in all directions, drifting in the sea. Celestial Phenomenon Laozu reached out and waved his hand, and the few adepts who had been shaken to the core immediately stabilized their bodies in the sea. They did not even have time to thank celestial phenomenon Laozu, as they all used their powers to float to the surface of the sea. Celestial phenomenon Laozu took one last look in the direction of the seawater. The seawater there had already been dyed dark red, and the entire place had become a world of fire. Then, celestial phenomenon Laozu's entire body disappeared in the turbulent sea. At this time, the surface of the Northwest Sea had already become a place where tsunamis were wreaking havoc. Giant waves that were tens or even hundreds of feet high were rolling and crashing in all directions. Many Dharma adepts who were closer to the Northwest Sea had a change of expression on their faces. They hurriedly sent messages back to their respective sects, instructing them to activate the protective formation to defend against the tsunamis that were hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of miles wide. Chapter 995. With the passage of time, the violent turbulence of the sea finally began to slow down. However, the rolling waves and rising steam made it seem as if the entire Northwest Sea was boiling. Lu Ping knew that this was the underwater volcano erupting. At the same time, it was also rising towards the surface of the sea. However, at this time, he could not care about the situation around him like the other Dharma adepts. At the same time, intentionally or unintentionally, he and the other Dharma adepts began to occupy their own territories in midair. After coming out from the mouth of the volcano, Lu Ping had actually used up quite a lot of his inner yuan. Fortunately, his inner yuan was much stronger than that of ordinary people. However, when he had rushed to the place where the fire vein was sealed, the inner yuan in his body had already been used up by more than half. Otherwise, he would not have needed to borrow the power of the Jade Soul Fire. Although the Jade Soul Fire was a spiritual fire of the heavens and earth, if it was not refined by true essence, it could only be used by planting a seed in this spiritual fire using divine sense. Lu Ping's body was filled with water-based inner yuan, so refining this spirit fire naturally took twice the effort for half the result. Fortunately, Lu Ping's divine will was strong, so he was able to do it with ease. Lu Ping floated in midair, holding a top-grade spirit stone in his hand as he began to recover the inner yuan in his body. At the same time, in his heart's core space, the Linglong wine cauldron was also emitting a dense mist. The dragon Dharma power opened its mouth and inhaled. This dense mist was continuously refined by the Dharma power and fed back into Lu Ping's blood. The inner yuan in his body began to recover quickly. Using top-grade spirit stones to replenish the inner yuan in one's body was a luxury even for Dharma adepts. The scarcity of top-grade spirit stones meant that Dharma adepts would usually only use top-grade spirit stones during training. Just to replenish the inner yuan in one's body, high-grade spirit stones were more than enough. However, when Lu Ping had captured He Shiyun alive, he had naturally robbed her as well. Besides the few treasures that He Shiyun had kept in his heart's core space, Lu Ping had basically taken everything from her body. Among them were 6 or 7 top-grade spirit stones, which He Shiyun had probably accumulated over the years. Now, all of them had gone to Lu Ping. Lu Ping, who had gained some extra income, naturally did not mind using a top-grade spirit stone to quickly recover his inner yuan. The North Sea cultivators were indeed incomparable to the East Ocean Crystal Palace cultivators of the same level. Back then, Lu Ping killed Ancestor Kun Yu, who was also at the early Dharma stage, had more than 20 top-grade spirit stones on him. The difference in treatment between the two cultivators was like heaven and earth. While Celestial Laozu and the others tried to expand their Zhenling range in midair, they also surrounded Lu Ping to prevent him from being disturbed. At this time, a new round of struggle between the various sects and Laozu had begun once again. The rising water vapor formed a thick, red poisonous fog on the surface of the sea, constantly obscuring people's vision and even hindering the detection of the adepts' divine will. Fortunately, there were Dharma adepts everywhere in the sky, so they did not care too much about the poison in the fog. However, in order to expand their respective territories as much as possible, everyone still began to suppress the fog that rose from the surface of the sea. The fog was suppressed again and again, forming a layer of red poisonous fog that was 10 feet high on the surface of the sea. The tumbling seawater was already covered by the thick fog, but the tumbling fog was still able to indicate the situation at the bottom of the sea to the adepts. The seawater within a radius of 1,000 miles was boiling, and the red fog was rising. All the adepts on the surface of the sea were secretly shocked as they tried to occupy their territory. From the looks of it, the entire group of volcanoes under the sea was equivalent to a giant island with a radius of 1,000 miles. On top of it, there must be a huge mountain range. If the entire mountain range was a group of volcanoes, there must be thousands or even tens of thousands of them. However, everyone in Jinling had already expected this, so they just blindly formed a huge encirclement in midair, constantly occupying the area above the sea. At this time, the adepts of the various sects had also reacted. Countless communication jade slips were once again sent out in all directions, beginning to call for reinforcements from their respective sections. Some of the sects that were closer to the Northwest Sea had already sent their adepts over to join in the encirclement of the various sections. However, in front of Jinling, even excluding Lu Ping, there were still 7 Dharma adepts. The other sects, like Xianling sect and Shanghai sect, were far from being able to compete with them. Just at this moment, several powerful beams of light cut into the formation that the Dharma adepts had formed on the surface of the sea, causing the cultivators of the various sects to be enraged. However, when they saw the people in the beams of light, they had no choice but to give up and cease their attacks. Wu Shihuan, Cheng Shizhuang, Ma Shifang, and Zhang Shiji, these 4 adepts of the Crystal Palace had joined Xianling sect's camp, causing Xianling sect's power to increase greatly. The area that they occupied above the sea instantly doubled. The Dharma adepts of the neighboring sects of Xianling sect had no choice but to retreat in the face of the fierce reputation of the Crystal Palace. In an instant, the area that Xianling sect occupied exceeded that of Jinling. Another few beams of light flew over. Dong Kun had also rushed over with He Shiyun and Wang Xiqing. Out of the 5 mid-Dharma adepts of the Shanghai sect, 4 had arrived. Only Zhang Shi had not appeared until now. With 4 mid-Dharma adepts and 3 early Dharma adepts, the area that the Shanghai sect occupied also expanded rapidly. However, Jinling had no intention of competing with these 2 sections. They only occupied the area of the sea according to their own rhythm. Also, unlike the other sects who occupied the area blindly, the positions of the few Laozu of Jinling on the sea were much more orderly. However, it was fortunate that the other sects did not want to clash with Jinling at this time. Once there was any conflict with Jinling's area, they would immediately retreat far away. Even so, there were still many sects who had begun to move closer to Jinling, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and slowly formed a loose encirclement around the perimeter. Other than the Jinling adept, Xingjian, who had seen the full picture of the underwater volcanoes, no one from the other sects had ever seen the true nature of the underwater volcanoes. Now that they saw Jinling's arrangement to occupy the sea, they naturally knew that Jinling was purposely encircling some of the more valuable volcanoes into their own area of influence. The volcanoes that Jinling had set his sights on in the future might not be as good as Jinling's volcanoes, but at least they would be much better than their own random encirclement, relying entirely on luck. At this time, 2 beams of light came rushing over from the sea in the distance. At this time, almost all the Dharma adepts from the various sects had arrived. As the various sects occupied their own areas of influence, they all turned their attention to these 2 beams of light. The first person turned into a hurricane. When his entire body stopped, a gust of wind blew past, almost causing the crimson poisonous fog that had been suppressed and condensed by the tens of Dharma adepts below his feet to swirl again. Jinling, Liang Tianfeng. At this time, perhaps only Jinling had the energy to spare to send out a Dharma adept. However, Liang Tianfeng's appearance only caused many of the Laozu present to sigh a little. The Dharma adept behind Liang Tianfeng was the one who once again shocked the entire North Sea Street. Jinren Xiansen, no, it should be Laozu Tiansen now. After decades of training in seclusion, Jinren Xiansen, who had also condensed the 7th grade golden core, had finally broken through the final barrier and become Jinling's 15th Dharma adept. 15 Dharma adepts. This was a huge force. Even the powerful Fei Ling sect only had 18 Dharma adepts in the past. At that moment, the various Laozu sects in the entire North Sea all had different thoughts. The various sects, which had originally been competitive with each other, all became dispirited. On the other hand, Junling's power had increased greatly because of the addition of 2 Dharma adepts. The area of the sea that it controlled increased again and again, and the sects that had gathered around Junling also subconsciously avoided Junling's expansion. Although there was a thick layer of crimson fog covering the surface of the sea, at that moment, a series of water columns began to erupt from the surface of the sea, forcing Laozu sects who were floating on the surface of the sea to increase their altitude as much as possible in order to avoid the water columns that were shooting towards them. Before the boiling hot seawater could return to the sea, it had already turned into water vapor and dissipated, leaving only puffs of crimson poisonous fog that filled the air. Then, they were once again suppressed into the crimson fog layer on the surface of the sea by the adepts. At that moment, Lu Ping, who had been floating in the air recovering his inner yuan, suddenly jolted, as if he had received some news. He suddenly raised his head and said, "It's coming, be careful!" After saying that, he took the lead and continued to increase his altitude from the surface of the sea. A clear cry sounded, and Lu Qing'er transformed into a green phoenix. Carrying Lu Ping on her back, she began to circle above the surface of the sea. What a divine blue Luan mount! The various sects did not have time to exclaim. Those who reacted quickly, knowing that the underwater volcano was about to rise from the surface of the sea, also hurriedly prepared to attack. However, what the crowd waited for was not the volcano rising from the surface of the sea. Instead, the volcano began to erupt tens of feet from the surface of the sea with fiery lava. A Dharma adept could not dodge in time and was instantly hit by a column of fire. His entire body screamed in pain, and he cast more than 10 protective spells. However, by the time the people beside him managed to save him, he looked like he was on the verge of death, and no one knew if he would be able to recover. Although there were a few other Dharma adepts who managed to avoid the pillars of fire that shot out from the bottom of the sea, they were still burnt to a sorry state by the high temperature of the flames. The cultivators of the various sects all turned pale with fright. They did not expect that the lava that the volcano spewed out would have such power. No wonder that Junling cultivator could fly so high. They had already been prepared for this. The various sects cultivators all began to fly high above the surface of the sea. At that moment, pillars of fire began to shoot up from the bottom of the sea. From afar, it looked as if the entire sea was on fire. Hundreds of pillars of fire covered an area of about 1,000 miles on the vast surface of the sea. Indeed, it was the size of a huge island. And as these hundreds of pillars of fire turned into thick volcanic ash and began to fall towards the surface of the sea in front of them suddenly welcomed a moment of silence. Just as everyone was wondering what was happening, a low rumbling sound suddenly came from the bottom of the sea. It was as if a monster hidden at the bottom of the sea was about to rush out of the sea. Gurgle! 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 The splashes of water became more and more frequent, and the cultivators of the various sects became more and more anxious. At that moment, almost 100 beams of light suddenly lit up from the red fog that covered the entire surface of the sea. "It's coming out! It's coming out!" Nearly 100 streaks of light suddenly broke through the crimson mist and fled in all directions. Chapter 996. Hundreds of spiritual fires suddenly rushed out from the sea within a radius of 1,000 miles, causing many Dharma adepts to cry out in alarm as they fled in all directions. The North Sea adepts had never seen so many spiritual objects of heaven and earth, and these spiritual fires were the most precious among all spiritual objects. With the spiritual fires suddenly flying around in front of them, some of the weak-willed adepts were even stunned for a moment. Other than a few Dharma adepts, almost all the other adepts began to fight for these spiritual fires that were flying around randomly. Previously, many of the adepts had their own territories on the sea, with the exception of a few major sects, but the rest could no longer be maintained. Celestial Elephant Laozu and Dao Xing Laozu took the lead. Celestial Elephant Laozu suddenly made his move, And in an instant, more than 10 shadows of arms appeared in the sky, and in an instant, 7 spiritual fires were caught in his hands. On the other side, Dao Xing Laozu did even more. Similarly, more than 10 mysterious winds were peeled off from his body, and the 8 spiritual fires had already been caught by these small whirlwinds, and then, one by one, they fell into Dao Xing Laozu's hands. Following closely behind these two were the Tuzhenling Laozu and the East Pole Laozu. Tian Fan and Tian Shui worked together to capture 6 spiritual fires, while the East Pole Laozu also captured 4 spiritual fires. However, when the East Pole Laozu turned to look, he saw that the Jinling Lu Tianping had also caught 4 spiritual fires. How could this be? The East Pole Laozu's expression quickly turned gloomy. In fact, the moment Lu Ping made his move, the harvest was not much different from the other mid-Dharma adepts, and they were all aiming for 3 spiritual fires. However, at the moment when Lu Ping made his move, the avatar Lu Xiaoping, who was holding Lu Ping's aqua sword, also made his move, snatching a spiritual fire back before a Linggu sect adept could. The rest of the mid-Dharma adepts had only managed to get 2 or 3 flames. Some of the more unlucky ones had only managed to get 1. However, the adepts at the mid-Dharma stage and above had basically all managed to get their hands on something, and there were no signs of them returning empty-handed. In an instant, almost 100 kindling seeds were divided up by the dozens of Dharma adepts. Jinling used the advantage of his position and the fact that he had the most number of Dharma adepts. In one fell swoop, he obtained 23 kindling seeds, which was about a quarter of the total number of spiritual fires. Everyone had at least 1 kindling. Next was the alliance of Xian Ling sect and Water Crystal Palace, who had obtained more than 10 spirit fires in one go. The Blue Sea sect had obtained close to 10. These 3 forces alone had split close to half of the spirit fires that had flown out of the sea. The surface of the sea fell silent once again. The adepts who had harvested could not wait to check their own gains. Only then did they realize that among the eruption of kindling seeds, a portion of them were not spiritual fires, but mystical item kindling seeds. Although they were still considered precious, other than a few extremely special existences, most mystical item kindling could not compare to the spiritual fires themselves. Jinling's 20 over kindling seeds were mixed with 6 mystical item kindling. Out of the 17 kindling seeds, 10 were of the mystic grade, while the remaining 7 were of the earth grade. 2 of them were of the earth grade, one was obtained by Tian Xiang Laozu, the other was obtained by Tian Qing Laozu, and the remaining 2 were of the earth grade from Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 of them were of the earth grade. Out of the 4 kindling seeds that Lu Ping obtained, 2 were of the earth grade, and the last one was obtained by Tian Lu Laozu. At this moment, a cry of surprise came from Xian Ling sect. A black-red flame flashed and disappeared. It turned out that among the 8 kindling seeds that Dao Xing Laozu had obtained, there was a heaven-grade inferior grade spiritual fire. It could be said to be one of the highest quality kindling seeds in this wave of spiritual fires. However, other than this kindling, the alliance between Xian Ling's sect and the Crystal Palace's luck was not too good. Out of the 10 kindling seeds, only 2 were of the earth grade inferior grade, the rest were of the mystic grade and mystical item kindling. Shanghai sect's harvest was considered average, but the other sects were lucky enough to obtain a heaven grade inferior grade, or even a heaven grade inferior grade spiritual fire. There were also some cultivators who fought with each other for the spiritual items of heaven and earth. The rumbling sound from the bottom of the sea was getting closer and closer. The seawater began to surge violently. The waves broke through the thick red fog on the surface of the sea and shattered in midair, sparkling with a sparkling light. After the waves subsided, the cultivators then realized that unbeknownst to them, there was already boiling magma on the surface of the sea. Boom! 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 A series of booming sounds reverberated throughout the entire world as columns of smoke and fire shot up into the sky. The entire sky was first filled with red-colored waves of fire. Even the cultivators who were flying at a higher altitude had no choice but to utilize various methods to avoid the impact of the waves of fire. Next, thick volcanic ash drifted up into the sky, obscuring the vision of the Dharma stage cultivators and restricting the use of their divine senses. Poof! A spiritual fire of heaven and earth suddenly jumped out of the fire wave, then escaped under the cover of the thick volcanic ash. However, very quickly, this spiritual fire was noticed by a few Dharma adepts nearby who were using their own defensive methods. A few of them tried to catch this spiritual fire, but it was inevitable that they would collide with each other in midair. The magical spells of several Dharma adepts clashed with each other, the power of which was no weaker than the violent eruption of a volcano. Although this spiritual fire was very spiritual, under such a powerful attack, it could no longer maintain its spiritual nature. The flame flickered a few times, but in the end, it was completely extinguished. An earth-grade spiritual fire was wasted just like that. From time to time, the same scene played out in the sky above the sea. Laozu from the various sects would usually retreat after a single attack, and there would not be a situation where they would fight to the death. However, it was rare for the cultivators to completely extinguish the spiritual fire because they could not control it. Most of the cultivators were still able to take care of these things when fighting for the spiritual fire and still managed to gain something from it. At this time, Lu Ping had already caught 2 spiritual fires in the midst of the waves of fire and the volcanic ash. However, the quality of these fires was not too high. They were both low to mid-grade profound grade. This was also because Lu Ping's divine will was far stronger than others. He was always one step ahead of others to find the fire seeds hidden in the waves of fire or volcanic ash. It was just that his luck was a little bad and he did not find a high-grade spiritual fire. Lu Ping swam around the area, looking for the hidden spiritual fires of heaven and earth. At the same time, he tried his best to protect the area that Jinling had previously occupied. From time to time, he would use hidden confrontations to force the other Dharma adepts who were wandering around to retreat. It was not that Lu Ping was waiting for his prey. It was because Jinling had done a general survey of the underwater volcanoes beforehand. He was able to confirm that the volcanic mountain range under the sea that they had occupied now was the place with the highest number of volcanoes in the entire volcanic region. At the same time, it was very likely that it was the place where all kinds of fire-type spiritual materials were gathered. If it was just for the spiritual fires of heaven and earth that were spat out during the volcanic eruptions, the various sects would not have started to occupy the underwater volcanic region in advance. In reality, the underwater volcanic region that had been nurtured for who knew how many years did not only contain the spiritual fires of heaven and earth that were already, about to be, or still hidden. Other than that, there were also various spiritual material mines, fire veins, and other fire-type treasures that were born in the volcanoes. All in all, to the entire North Sea training world, this volcanic region was equivalent to a virgin land that had not been developed by anyone. Its value might even be higher than the Spirit Stone mines on Frost Island. In the long run, compared to wandering around to collect spiritual fires of heaven and earth and firmly occupying a large area of volcanic region, Jinling naturally valued the latter more. However, in reality, it was precisely because Jinling had a large number of Dharma adepts and a large area of influence that even though Jinling did not go around searching for spiritual materials like the other sects, the actual harvest that Jinling obtained was much more than the other sections. Just as Lu Ping, with great difficulty, discovered a mid-grade earth-level spiritual fire hidden in an extremely thick layer of volcanic ash. He turned into a stream of water and broke through the protection of the still hot volcanic ash. After he had completely grasped the spiritual fire in his hands, a few miles behind Lu Ping, 2 vigorous forces suddenly rose and entangled with each other. Lu Ping was shocked. In the North Sea, there were only 2 great Dharma adepts, Tianxiang and Daoxing, who could cause Lu Ping to feel shocked. If ordinary Dharma adepts encountered such a scene, they would all hide as far away as possible. Even the adepts of Jinling and Xianling's sect would do the same. This was because ordinary mid-Dharma adepts often did not have the right to participate in a battle between great Dharma adepts. Otherwise, they would often become a burden to their own Dharma adepts. However, Jinling had 2 mid-Dharma adepts who could join forces and still participate in a battle of this level. Lu Ping's powerful divine will had already detected that the two mid-Dharma adepts had already merged into one. With an aura that was slightly weaker than that of the two great Dharma adepts, they quickly headed towards the place where the two were clashing. Lu Ping hesitated for a moment, but he could not shake off the curiosity of wanting to see the battle between great Dharma adepts. In the end, he gritted his teeth and moved his body, heading towards the center of the two rising auras. Although the battle of auras between Tian Xiang Laozu and Dao Xing Laozu was getting more and more intense, the battle between the two was very casual. They did not attack each other, but only focused on the scarlet flame floating between them. Heaven-level mid-grade, mother-child geocentric fire. So it was this thing. No wonder the two great Dharma adepts would fight for it. At this time, it was clear that Dao Xing Laozu had a slight advantage. The distance between the mother-child geocentric fire and Dao Xing Laozu was slightly closer than the distance between it and Tian Xiang Laozu. On the other side, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, who were rushing over, were unexpectedly blocked by a volcano that suddenly rose from the sea. Then, they heard the loud sound of waves behind them. When they turned around, they saw that the East Pole Laozu and Dao Xing Laozu had joined forces to attack Tian Fan and Tian Shui. Lu Ping was wearing the Cloud Glow 5 Elements robe. Using the volcanic dust as a cover, he sneaked all the way to the vicinity. He did not dare to use his divine will to investigate, so he could only use the three pure true eyes to look in the direction where Tian Xiang and Dao Xing were fighting. Chapter 997. As a whole, the mother and son flames could be considered to be a mid-grade heaven-rank spirit treasure. But under certain conditions, it could only be considered to be a low-grade heaven-rank spirit treasure. The difference between them was the profundities of the mother and son flames. The mother-child earth fire could split. Once the earth fire as a whole began to split, the grade of the earth fire as the parent body would drop to the heaven-rank lower grade. Similarly, 3 earth-rank upper-grade second-generation spiritual fires would appear. However, the splitting of the mother and child earth fire did not stop there. The 3 earth-rank upper-grade second-generation fire would continue to split. Each child fire would split into 3 mystic rank upper-grade third-generation fire. In this way, there would be 9 mystic rank upper-grade third-generation fire. At the same time, the 3 earth rank upper grade second generation fire would drop to earth rank middle grade after splitting. The reason why this mother and child core fire, which had yet to split apart, was worth the 2 Dharma adepts fighting over was not only because of the quality of the fire, but also because it could be used to practice a powerful fire-based spell formation that had been passed down in the world of practitioners for a long time but was rarely mastered. Inferno burning the heavens. There were a total of 13 child-mother core fires after they were split, and there was an extremely mysterious connection between them. There was once a formation master in the world of cultivation who was inspired by this, and spent more than 100 years to create this inferno sky-burning inferno formation. Once it was put to use, it displayed a great deal of power. This formation master, who was only at the early Dharma stage, was able to trap and kill a late Dharma stage great practitioner, causing the inferno sky-burning inferno formation to shake the world of cultivation. After that, although the heaven-burning inferno formation rarely appeared in the cultivation world, it was only because the mother-child geocentric fire was rarely found in the cultivation world. However, the cultivation inheritance of the heaven-burning inferno formation was not lost. Jinling was in the Yingtian dojo, and Xianling's sect was in the Yingtian dojo because they once had a foundation that far surpassed Jinling's. The battle between Celestial Phenomenon Laozu and Dao Xing Laozu naturally attracted the attention of many cultivators. However, under the obstruction of the thick volcanic ash and the violent eruption of magma, few people dared to come over and watch the battle between the two supreme cultivators. Right now, Dao Xing Laozu had already gained a slight advantage. Celestial Phenomenon Laozu stretched his hands out as a formless energy gushed forth from all directions, coiling around the spiritual fire in the air. However, Dao Xing Laozu pushed out with his hands as countless sharpness manifested in the air, shooting out in all directions, slashing apart the energy that celestial phenomenon Laozu created in the air. Once again, the mother and child core fire remained suspended in the air. Dao Xing Laozu had stopped celestial phenomenon Laozu's attack on the spiritual fire. Instead, he turned around and hooked two of his fingers towards the spiritual fire. The mother and child core fire once again moved towards Dao Xing Laozu's direction. From afar, another two explosive sounds could be heard. The East Pole Laozu and Dao Xian Laozu had joined forces, but under the combined attack of the two Laozu, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, they were forced to retreat. However, the two of them still tried their best to delay Tian Fan and Tian Shui, not allowing them to rush over to help. Especially since the East Pole Laozu was a cultivator at the peak of the Middle Dharma realm. With his cultivation, if it was a one-on-one situation, either Tian Shui nor Tian Fan would be a match for him. Celestial phenomenon Laozu stretched out his finger and flicked it. A strong wind swirled in midair, as though it had become soft and flexible. It wrapped around Dao Xing Laozu's hidden force and pulled it taut. The two Dharma realm cultivators were now in a contest of strength against the mother and child core fire. Dao Xing Laozu pulled towards his side, while celestial phenomenon Laozu pulled at the same time. The two hidden forces immediately shattered the surrounding space. Bang! The two hidden forces were torn apart at the same time. The mother and child core fire suddenly lost control and immediately bounced upwards. At this moment, Lu Ping suddenly appeared in between the two Grand Realm cultivators. With a stretch of his hand, he grabbed the mother and child core fire in his hand. At this moment, the two Grand Realm cultivators' hidden forces suddenly burst forth. Following closely behind, they rushed towards Lu Ping, who had suddenly appeared above the spiritual fire. "You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth," Dao Xing Laozu said coldly when he saw the sudden appearance of Lu Ping, who actually wanted to take advantage of the two Grand Realm cultivators. "Nonsense!" Celestial phenomenon Laozu, on the other hand, was a little anxious. He suddenly grabbed towards the sky, as though he wanted to offset the hidden force as much as possible. However, at this moment, Dao Xing Laozu seemed to have predicted that celestial phenomenon Laozu was going to make a move. Similarly, a gust of wind rose, dispelling celestial phenomenon Laozu's grab. Dao Xing Laozu did not attack Lu Ping, but he blocked celestial phenomenon Laozu's rescue. It was clear that he wanted Lu Ping to suffer such a hidden loss. At this time, there was no room for Lu Ping to dodge. However, since Lu Ping dared to be the fisherman in the battle between the two Grand Realm cultivators, he was naturally prepared for this. Lu Ping suppressed the mother and child core fire in his hand with one hand, and suddenly pressed down with the other. Similarly, a hidden force slammed down from above. This hidden force was like waves crashing down one after another. However, the hidden force that erupted from above was like countless scattered torrents, completely disintegrating the surging force of Lu Ping, and then continued to hit Lu Ping's body. Lu Ping's body did a somersault in midair, and a cloud sail appeared, wrapping around Lu Ping's body. Several hidden forces hit the cloud sail. The countless auspicious clouds that surged on the surface of the cloud sail were all dispersed, revealing the weapon spirit, the golden-winged roc, who was hiding behind the cloud sail. The golden-winged roc let out a startled cry and flapped its wings. Auspicious clouds once again gathered around its body, and at the same time, the cloud sail began to fold up, using its body to withstand the hidden forces of the two Dharma adepts. However, Lu Ping himself was still sent flying by the hidden forces in midair, crashing into 3 pillars of fire. However, the cloud sail was, after all, a spirit-grade protective treasure, and its protective magic power had already been successfully condensed. Although Lu Ping was hit by the hidden forces to the point of vomiting, he still managed to withstand it. The surrounding cultivators who were secretly observing the battle between the two Laozu all gasped. Dao Xing Laozu looked coldly at Lu Ping in the distance, and his figure retreated. At the same time, a cloud of volcanic ash came, covering Dao Xing Laozu's figure. When the volcanic ash dissipated, Dao Xing Laozu had already retreated and disappeared. In the distance, Lu Ping finally managed to stop. When he returned, he would inevitably be reprimanded by celestial phenomenon Laozu, and the mother and child core fire was also handed over to celestial phenomenon Laozu. Although the mother and child core fire was very powerful, it was not particularly suitable for pill concoction or artifact forging. It also did not possess the magical effect of burning divine sense like the jade phosphorus soulfire. Although it could be used to set up the Inferno Purgatory Sky Incineration Array, it was not suitable for cultivators like Lu Ping, who cultivated water-type cultivation techniques. As time went on, more and more volcanoes broke through the surface of the ocean. However, the number of volcanoes that were still erupting was gradually decreasing. A thick layer of crimson fog covered the surface of the ocean, and the silhouette of a massive island gradually took shape on the surface of the ocean. Lu Ping hovered high up in the sky while Lu Qiner hovered around Lu Ping, never leaving Lu Ping's line of sight. "Big brother, the volcano on the lower left is about to erupt." When Lu Ping heard this, he turned around and landed in the air 3 miles away from the mountain peak. At this moment, a rumbling sound came from the belly of the mountain, and an orange-red flame suddenly exploded on the peak of the mountain. Dark red magma, accompanied by thick volcanic ash, rushed into the sky. Lu Ping's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. At the moment when the volcano erupted, he had already captured 2 relatively strong auras of spiritual fire. The thin water-long stream's sword broke the flowing magma in one fell swoop. An emerald-green flame was about to escape, but it was fished out by Lu Ping from the broken magma. Lu Ping's face was filled with joy. It was actually a heaven lower-grade spiritual fire. This was one of the few heaven lower-grade spiritual fires obtained during the eruption of the volcanic group in the Northwest Sea region. At this moment, a huge gray bird suddenly rushed out of the scorching volcanic ash on the other side. Lu Qiner shook her body, shook off all the volcanic ash that fell on her body, and restored the beautiful body of Qing Yuan. Although Lu Qiner couldn't directly dive into the depths of the magma to capture the hidden spiritual fire like Lu Ping, Lu Qiner herself was a Qing Yuan who was proficient in fire. She had a natural affinity for volcanoes, and she could be immune to most of the fire damage. Lu Qiner opened her mouth and spat out a cluster of flames. It was a heaven and earth spiritual fire that she had caught from the magma that soared into the sky. Its quality had reached the middle grade of earth rank. Since celestial phenomenon Laozu and Dao Xing Laozu directly fought for the mother-child geocentric fire, the eruption of this volcano seemed to be coming to an end, and the appearance of heaven and earth spiritual fires became fewer and fewer. Despite this, the Laozu of various sects still didn't give up and stayed in the air. At this time, Lu Ping relied on Lu Qiner's natural affinity for volcanoes to find 4 volcanoes that were about to erupt, and at the moment when the volcanoes erupted, he snatched 3 spiritual fires and 3 mystical fires from them before the other Laozu. Such means made many Laozu of various sects secretly jealous to death. In addition to the emerald green heaven rank spiritual fire that he had now obtained, Lu Ping alone had obtained 11 spiritual fires and the kindling of 3 mystical fires. Among them, the highest grade was a heaven rank spiritual fire, and there were also 3 earth rank kindling. The rest were all profound rank kindling. This kind of harvest had far exceeded the middle Dharma Laozu of various sections. Even the East Pole Laozu could not compare to him. Only the 2 middle Dharma Laozu, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, and the 2 great practitioners, Tian Xiang and Dao Xing, could surpass Lu Ping in terms of harvest. The volcanic ash in the sky had already gradually dissipated under the various methods of the Laozu of various sections. The dull roar from the bottom of the sea was still ringing, and the earthquake was still ongoing. However, the eruption of the volcano had gradually stopped. A thick layer of red fog that covered the surface of the sea had also spread over the entire giant island that had appeared on the surface of the sea along with the rise of the volcanoes. The fog had also spread over the entire island, and this thick fog no longer evaporated, but because of the expansion, it became a little lighter. The giant island that was covered with volcanoes finally appeared on the surface of the sea. Chapter 998. The eruption of the volcanoes gradually came to a stop as the huge island rose from the bottom of the sea. However, the magma at the crater was still boiling, and thick smoke billowed into the sky, shrouding the entire island in a layer of gray fog. Everyone knew that there might be a large number of heaven and earth spirit fires hidden in this huge volcanic cluster, but Lao Tzu did not have the time or energy to find out exactly where they were. He could not wait here for them to come out, so the rest of the task of exploring this island was left to the other Earth stage adepts in the sect. At this time, the cultivators of the various sects finally realized that the 10 Dharma adepts of Junling had already occupied an area of a few hundred miles from the coast of the huge volcanic cluster to the inside of the island. They had roughly occupied about 1/5 of the area of the huge volcanic cluster, and this area was the area where the volcanoes were the most densely distributed. When the cultivators of the various sects saw this, their teeth itched with hatred, but there was nothing they could do. Not to mention the fact that Junling had a general understanding of the underwater volcanic cluster in advance. Just the strength displayed by the large number of Dharma adepts was enough to make the various sects hesitate to take action. However, before the various sects cultivators could secretly think of all kinds of strange ideas, there were already more than 10 rays of light in the sky flying towards the huge volcanic cluster. The cultivators of the various sects swept out with their divine senses, and a moment later, all kinds of complicated expressions appeared on their faces. After receiving the news that the volcanic cluster in the Northwest Sea was gradually calming down, Junling's fire-based adepts, as well as those who were not fire-based adepts but were alchemists and craftsmen, had already set out on Floating Island, just in time to arrive at the scene. If it was said that Junling's few Lao Tzu had first occupied the most important part of this vast giant island, now that these disciples had arrived in time, they had actually occupied it. The cultivators of the various sects had no choice but to admit it. Lu Ping jumped out and stopped the dozens of Junling adepts who were about to enter the volcanic cluster, saying, "The giant volcanic cluster is filled with a poisonous fog condensed by the fire poison, which has a subtle impact on the cultivator's inner yuan. If you stay here for too long, I'm afraid it will be detrimental to your future cultivation. This fire poison is extremely difficult to deal with, but I have a kind of poisonous fire here that can restrain the poisonous fog in the volcanic cluster. If you think you are not prepared, you can take a poisonous fire from me to avoid the poison. When you return from the volcanic cluster, you can just exchange the fire." A poison that could make even an alchemist feel difficult to deal with naturally made the dozens of Junling adepts at the core forging stage feel uneasy. Seeing Lu Ping hold a jet-black flame in his hand, and then with a slight shake, dozens of sparks splashed out from the flame and turned back into small flames, many of the adepts stepped forward to take a small flame and hang it in front of them. After that they began to occupy the area that Lao Tzu had marked out. After the cultivators from Junling's sect fell into the volcanic region, the scarlet-red poisonous mist converged upon the poisonous flame on each cultivator's waist. Gradually, an area free of the poisonous mist was formed around each cultivator. At the same time, the bean-sized flame on each cultivator's waist flickered. It appeared to have become even more active. Seeing that the Junling adepts were so busy, Junling's excited cheers came from the island from time to time. It seemed that the cultivation resources on this island were so abundant that everyone bowed to them. This made Lao Tzu both excited and envious. They were excited because Junling's abundant cultivation resources would once again usher in a great increase after the large spirit stone mine on Frost Island. They were envious because Junling was always able to get ahead of the other sections. Although the Lao Tzu of the various sects had roughly divided up the entire volcanic cluster, the boundaries between them were not clear. This gave the adepts under Junling the leeway to take advantage of the opportunity to expand their own territory. As for the other sects that bordered Junling, Lao Tzu could not say anything. Just as Junling had begun to delineate the boundaries of this virgin land, set up formations, explore the terrain, and check out the various rare treasures hidden within the volcanic cluster, the cultivators from the other sects finally arrived. Under Lao Tzu's reminder, the scarlet poisonous fog that permeated the volcanic island also attracted the attention of the cultivators from the various sections. The cultivators from the various sects were also prepared for this. Almost all of them carried poison-dispelling pills, antidotes, and the like. However, these cultivators clearly did not have a deep understanding of the poisonous fog like Lu Ping. Not long after they confidently charged into the volcanic cluster, some cultivators with low cultivation bases ran out in panic. There were also some whose bodies were burning hot. Clearly, they had been poisoned by the fire poison. Soon after, some mid and late core forging cultivators with decent cultivation bases gradually could not withstand the corrosion of the scarlet poisonous fog and retreated one after another. In less than 2 hours, nearly 100 cultivators from the various sects who had arrived earlier had all retreated from the volcanic cluster. Many of them had their inner yuan eroded by the fire poison. After receiving the black prison poison fire seed from Lu Ping, they entered Scarlet Mist Island once again. Jinling's territory on the island had increased from less than 1/5 of the original area to more than 1/5 of the original area. The various sects Laozu began to evacuate one after another. Jinling left behind two Laozu, Tianqing and Tianqin, to guard Scarlet Mist Island. At the same time, he commanded the disciples to continue developing the island. As for Tianfeng Laozu, he returned to Central Plains. Laozu, who had just condensed his Dharma idol not long ago, returned to Celestial Spirit Mountain to continue his cultivation in seclusion. Lu Ping left the black prison poison fire for Tianqin Laozu to use temporarily. At the same time, it was also to make it convenient for the disciples on the island to hand over the saturated fire seed. After the black prison poison fire had absorbed and neutralized the poison within, it would split into a new fire seed for the disciples to take away. At the same time, Tianqin Laozu also had to study the scarlet fire poison on Scarlet Mist Island and concoct a poison-repellent pill that could adapt to Scarlet Mist Island. As for Tianqing Laozu, he had obtained the mother-child geocentric fire and was preparing to concoct the heaven-burning hellfire array. If he could successfully concoct this array, with Tianqing's abilities, its power would be even greater than a supreme magic. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. On this day, Lu Ping was giving a lecture to the disciples on Huangli Island. With the eldest disciple Wang Xuanqi as the leader, Tian Xianwei, Du Xianluo, Fang Xianwei, Fang Xuanxia, and Xing Xuanwu, the 6 personal disciples, and several disciples were sitting in order. Just as they were listening to the impromptu lecture, Lu Ping suddenly stopped talking. All the disciples were confused. As the eldest disciple, Wang Xuanqi was about to open his mouth to ask, but he heard Lu Ping say, "Let's stop here for today. Your martial uncle Lei Delay has already condensed the Dharma idol. Remember to go and congratulate him after the lecture ends." After saying that, Lu Ping's figure had already disappeared from the cave residence. In a secret underground room on Huangli Island that was opened up by De Bail, a branch of the Huangli Island's spirit vein opened up and led directly to this place. An unparalleled aura crashed against the seal formation in the secret room. However, the waves of aura and spiritual chi that rushed up were all blocked by the seal formation in the secret room. Instead, the secret room accumulated a dense amount of spiritual chi, almost to the point of squeezing out water. 6th Brother Lei, who was sitting cross-legged in the secret room, seemed to have sensed something. He began to restrain the aura on his body as much as possible. However, he had just broken through to the next level of cultivation, so he could not completely control the situation of his body. This caused the aura around him to become extremely unstable. A space door gradually formed, and Lu Ping slowly walked out of the door. He smiled and said, "Congratulations, Brother Lei, for finally achieving the Dharma idol." 6th Brother Lei smiled faintly and said, "I originally advanced to the peak of the core forging realm before you did. It took me nearly 100 years to advance to the Dharma idol. However, whether it is in terms of cultivation or strength, you have already left me far behind. What is there to celebrate?" 6th Brother Lei stood up and stretched his arms and legs. Then, he looked around and said, "Your wife's method of setting up the formation is getting better and better. The seal formation in this secret room cannot be broken even with the power of the aura that I gathered when I condensed the Dharma idol." Lu Ping was about to say something, but he paused for a moment. He stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion in front of him. A space door was torn open by Lu Ping, and a message jade slip was taken out by Lu Ping. The jade slip only contained a message from Jiang Tianlin Laozu. Zhang Shi has arrived in the East Sea. Chapter 999. In the past 3 years, 2 major events had taken place. The first was the sudden emergence of Scarlet Mist Island and the large-scale development of the North Sea's cultivation world. This greatly alleviated the shortage of fire-attribute spiritual materials in the North Sea's cultivation world. Furthermore, there were a variety of spiritual materials in the volcanic region and the reserves were abundant. Not only did it attract the entire North Sea's cultivation world to take the risk to develop the island, but many cultivators from the East Sea and Middle Earth also came. Due to Jinling, the various sects in the North Sea began to divide up Scarlet Mist Island prematurely. By the time the other loose cultivators and other forces of the North Sea tried to intervene, most of the huge island had already fallen into the hands of the various forces of the North Sea, leaving only some leftovers for the loose cultivators. When the forces of the East Sea and Middle Earth also wanted a piece of the pie, they were attacked by the forces of the entire North Sea. The 2 sides inevitably came into conflict. As the biggest beneficiary of Scarlet Mist Island, Jinling faced the most provocations among the various forces of the North Sea. Fortunately, most of the forces from Middle Earth and Middle Earth were third-generation disciples sent out by their respective sects to broaden their knowledge and experience. Although they often had the upper hand in conflicts with the cultivators of the North Sea, they were foreign dragons after all. They rarely suffered serious casualties when fighting with the third-generation disciples of the North Sea. Usually, after breaking through the obstruction of the cultivators of the various sects and entering Scarlet Mist Island, the cultivators of the various sects would not deliberately encircle and suppress them. However, the constant fights with the cultivators of the East Sea and Middle Earth also gave the sects of the North Sea, especially the third-generation disciples of Jinling, a wake-up call. In the past, the cultivators who were considered experts in their respective sects often lost more than they won when fighting against cultivators of the same level from the other cultivation world. It turned out that they had always been the overlord of their own small world. They had never been to the cultivation world of the East Sea and Middle Earth, so how could they know how vast the cultivation world was? At best, they could only be regarded as a group of frogs at the bottom of a well. Jinling's situation was considered good among the various sections. At the very least, it was because the reputation of the Water Sword Immortal, Lu Tianping, was so great that the third-generation cultivators of the East Sea and Middle Earth would more or less give him some face. On the other hand, the situation of the other sects was not so good. In conflicts with foreign cultivators, these foreign cultivators were undoubtedly much more ruthless. Many disciples were seriously injured, and there were even news of cultivators dying. Although the senior cultivators of Jinling would not break the rules because of some disputes between the younger generation, as a third-generation disciple, Lu Tianping did not have such restrictions. If they angered Lu Tianping and he stood up for his fellow disciples, there were not many cultivators of the same generation who could be his match. After all, Lu Ping's current status in the cultivation world was earned through his own strength. When he was in Middle-earth, he was able to be close friends with Xie Tianyang of the Ziyang Palace and Sang Yu of the Spirit Beast Taming Sect, and he was even respected by the 2 of them. Moreover, the 3 of them had a glorious battle record of fighting against a mid-Dharma adept of the Tenma people. Even now, Lu Ping was still suspected of killing the young clan leader of the Tenma people. After Lu Ping advanced to the Dharma stage, not only did he master supreme magic, but he also defeated a mid-Dharma adept who also had supreme magic. He first defeated Bai Jishan on Frost Island, and then fought a battle with Wu Shihuan and Yuan Feixiang to a draw. Xie Tianyang, Sang Yu, Bai Jishan, Wu Shihuan, and Yuan Feixiang were all recognized as the best of the third-generation cultivators in the cultivation world. They were also the future great cultivators of their respective sects, and they were the pillars of their sects. And Lu Ping was able to become close friends with these people, or even fight to a draw. This kind of battle record was confirmed by the people involved, and it was spread by people with intentions. This made Lu Ping the best of the third-generation disciples in the entire cultivation world, and he had long become one of the few elite cultivators with the highest status among the third-generation cultivators in the cultivation world. And through the accounts of these foreign cultivators, the third-generation cultivators in the North Sea cultivation world finally had a better understanding of Lu Ping's real status in the cultivation world. This understanding undoubtedly became a greater blow to the cultivators of the same generation in the North Sea. Lu Tianping, who was originally like a monster in their eyes, had many more people outside the North Sea. Then what were they? It could be said that after Lu Ping made himself the best of the third-generation cultivators in the entire cultivation world, even the status of Jinling, who was originally unknown in the cultivation world, was greatly improved and received attention. In addition to more and more foreign forces getting involved in the situation in the North Sea, the second major event was Jiang Tianlin's experience of returning to the North Sea after the auction in Phantom City to kill Zhang Shi. Zhang Shi had been hot-headed in the Northwest Sea and failed to plot against the leader of Jinling, Lu Tianling. Instead, Jinling had something on him. At that time, Zhang Shi also knew that he had gotten into big trouble, so he did not participate in the rise of Scarlet Mist Island, causing Shanghai Sect's strength to suffer a great loss. In the end, the area of influence they had on Scarlet Mist Island was even smaller than that of Xianling sect. After the incident, the Jinling sect began to brazenly suppress the Blue Sea sect in all aspects throughout the entire North Sea. This was especially so after the great elder of the East Pole sect on Scarlet Mist Island, who was still at the mid-Dharma stage. As expected, the various sects in the North Sea chose to stand by and watch. At least on the surface, they all condemned Zhang Shi's actions. Jinling's suppression of Shanghai sect started with the dispute over the Spirit Stone mine on Frost Island. After Jinling successfully suppressed Shanghai sect's share, the two Laozu, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, returned to Frost Island. In the following Spirit Stone distribution, although Shanghai sect's share was not forcibly taken by Jinling, half of the supreme-grade Spirit Stones were forcibly replaced by high-grade Spirit Stones by Jinling. Dong Kun Laozu, who was stationed on Frost Island, was no match for the Wind and Snow Immortals and had no choice but to suffer this loss. After that, Lu Ping personally oversaw the distribution of the precious mid-sized Spirit Stone mine in the Northwest Sea. Together with Tian Feng, Tian Shan, and Tian Xin, they defeated Shanghai sect's Dong Yi, Dong Yun, and Dong Hu sect's Dong Hai sect's Dong Yi, Dong Yun, and Dong Hu sect's Dong Hai 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 sect's Dong High sex dong, high sex dong, high sex dong, high sex dong. After that, someone found traces of Zhang Shi in the Southeast Sea region. Lu Ping personally went to chase after him, but Zhang Shi fled at the sight of him, and Lu Ping returned empty-handed. On Scarlet Mist Island, Jinling's cultivators attacked Shanghai sect's territory several times. Most of the time, Jinling's cultivators robbed the other's spirit materials, destroyed the other's mines, formations, and mining puppets, and even triggered the volcanoes in their territory in advance. Although they did not cause the deaths of Shanghai sect's cultivators, they caused great losses to Shanghai sect. Naturally, the Shanghai sect was not willing to be outdone. Although they were in the wrong in the sneak attack on Lu Tianling, they still fought back as much as they could against Jinling's all-round suppression. Unfortunately, Jinling had already expected this. In the face of the Shanghai sect's counterattack, Jinling's defenses were tight. After several battles, not only did the Shanghai sect not gain much of an advantage, they also lost a lot of people, and the momentum of their counterattack was weakened once again. Of course, Jinling's strength would also cause some sects in the North Sea to have other thoughts in their hearts. Although they did not help either side on the surface, they secretly provided convenience. At the very least, they had to let the Shanghai sect persevere under Jinling's suppression. Only then could they achieve the goal of mutual destruction. Although the Tsenghai sect also knew the intentions of these forces that secretly supported them, they had no choice but to swallow this bitter fruit at this time. In order to exchange for the secret support of these forces, the Tsenghai sect gave up countless benefits, and sold a lot of inheritance that originally belonged to them. At this time, Jiang Tianlin, who was far away in the East Sea, heard the news of Lu Tianling's attack after attending the Fantasy Spirit City's auction. He quickly rushed back to the North Sea with Xianglu Laozu, leaving only Tiankong Laozu to guard Jingzhi Island. Jiang Tianlin, who returned to the North Sea, didn't have time to report to the sect what he had gained in the East Sea. The first thing he did was take over the command of the Dark Hall from Lu Tianling, and began to search for traces of Zhang Shi in the entire North Sea. Under Jiang Tianlin's command, the entire Dark Hall began to operate at an astonishing speed. Furthermore, it displayed a power that far surpassed what it had displayed in the past when it was under Li Xianyin and Lu Tianling's control. It was as if they were peeling silk from strands, and once again, they found traces of Zhang Shi. This time, Jiang Tianlin personally took action and very quickly found Zhang Shi, who was hiding in the northeastern sea near the Deep Sea Demon region. Before meeting Lu Ping, Zhang Shi's only opponent in the entire North Sea was Jiang Tianlin. After advancing to the mid-Dharma stage and mastering supreme powers, Zhang Shi's greatest hope was to be able to fight Jiang Tianlin in a fair and square battle. Unexpectedly, Lu Ping appeared out of nowhere and beat him up before Jiang Tianlin could even make a move. In the end, Zhang Shi was forced to retreat and run away. But in the depths of Zhang Shi's heart, he still hoped to fight Jiang Tianlin. Perhaps this had become the only hope to maintain the pride in his heart. However, reality was cruel. Both sides could be said to be enemies, and the battle lasted for several hours. In the end, restless vast ocean was defeated by fallen petals in profusion. Although Zhang Shi wasn't injured, Jiang Tianlin forcefully took away 18 years of his lifespan, which was even more chilling than being injured. Zhang Shi had no choice but to flee again. Jiang Tianlin chased after him. The two of them ran and chased for 2 whole years. From the northeastern sea to the deep sea demon region, they were chased out by the primordial crocodile clan's great practitioner, Ao Xian. Then, they entered the southeastern sea and fought again on Huanyu Island. When they reappeared, they were already in the southwestern sea. Along the stormy ocean, they fought all the way to the vicinity of Frost Island. Then, they went to the northern stormy ocean. The two of them fought 6 times along the way, and Zhang Shi lost every time. In total, he had lost 100 years of his life to Jiang Tianlin. All the Dharma adepts of the North Sea who had been watching this battle were so shocked that their teeth hurt. A lifespan of 100 years. Zhang Shi had only cultivated for a little over 600 years. Even if he was at the mid-Dharma stage and had a lifespan of 1,200 years, he was only left with a little over 500 years. Now, Jiang Tianlin had shaved away 1/5 of his lifespan. This great technique of fallen petals could really kill people without spilling blood. It was at this moment that the pursuit between the two of them that shook the entire cultivation world of the North Sea had to stop. Back then, the Azura that had been chased away by the 5 great cultivators of the North Sea had suddenly led a large army of Azura demons out of the ocean of storms. This time, not only Zhang Shi, even Jiang Tianlin had to flee. In a short year, the northwestern sea, except for Scarlet Mist Island, had fallen into the hands of Mara. Chapter 1000. No one knew how that Azura was able to pull out such a large Mara army from the ocean of storms. Its strength far exceeded that of the Battle of Frost Island. Under the strong appeals of the various sects in the North Sea, Jinling finally stopped suppressing the Blue Sea sect. The various sects' practitioners entered Scarlet Mist Island and began to join forces to resist the attack of Mara's army on Scarlet Mist Island. And Jiang Tianlin's pursuit of Zhang Shi had to stop first. After all, both the Blue Sea sect and Zhang Shi had paid a huge price this time. However, Jinling's suppression of the Blue Sea sect for 2 years had created unimaginable pressure on the Blue Sea sect. Just as the disaster of Mara swept through the Northwest Sea again, Jinling had just given up on suppressing the Blue Sea sect under the persuasion and pressure of the various sects in the North Sea. Then, another shocking news came from the Blue Sea sect. The East Pole Laozu had fallen under the Second Lightning Tribulation, and the Blue Sea sect's dream of becoming a Dharma adept had finally come to an end. The Blue Sea sect was probably going to fall. This became the voice of almost the entire North Sea sect. Although the news that the East Pole Laozu was about to advance to the late Dharma stage had spread throughout the North Sea sect a few years ago, the entire North Sea sect attributed the death of the East Pole Laozu to Jinling's suppression, and the outbreak of the disaster of Mara was the last straw. The East Pole Laozu was eager to break through and escape the Blue Sea sect's current predicament, so he had to take a risk. Unfortunately, he failed. The Blue Sea sect undoubtedly placed all their hatred on Jinling, but they had no choice but to hide this seed of hatred deep in their hearts, waiting for the day when it would take root and sprout. It was not that the Blue Sea sect did not want to hide the news of the fall of the East Pole Laozu, but in the end, it failed. Just as the entire North Sea was concentrating on Mara's invasion on Scarlet Mist Island, Jiang Tianlin Laozu's communication jade slip brought Lu Ping a surprising piece of news. Zhang Shi had actually gone to the East Sea. Because Jinling had the widest sphere of influence on the entire Scarlet Mist Island, Jinling's task of defending against Mara's invasion was the most important. With the Celestial Laozu in charge of the sect and the head Lu Tianling in control of the overall situation, Jiang Tianlin Laozu was the best candidate to take charge of the defense of Scarlet Mist Island. He could no longer take care of his own personal affairs. At this time, Jiang Tianlin could only hope that Lu Ping could continue to pursue Zhang Shi on his behalf. Slowly, Lu Ping also began to understand the meaning of Jiang Tianlin's move. He wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. With the fall of the East Pole, no one in the Blue Sea sect would be able to reach the late Dharma stage in the next 100 or 200 years, and among the second-generation disciples of the Blue Sea sect, only Zhang Shi had the qualifications and hoped to replace the East Pole Laozu. It could be said that the future of the entire Blue Sea sect could only be supported by Zhang Shi. Jinling naturally saw Zhang Shi's role, and the Blue Sea sect also knew that under such circumstances, Jinling would definitely choose the opportunity to get rid of Zhang Shi. Therefore, when the disaster of Mara broke out and the cultivators of the various sects were mobilizing their troops, the Blue Sea sect let Zhang Shi take the opportunity to leave the North Sea. At least he could leave a spark for the future rise of the Blue Sea sect. But all of this did not escape Jiang Tianlin's calculations. When Zhang Shi had just made his move to the East Sea, Jiang Tianlin had already received the news and sent the news to Lu Ping. His purpose was very clear. He hoped that Lu Ping would continue to go to the East Sea to kill Zhang Shi. Seeing the change in Lu Ping's expression, Sixth Brother Lei smiled and asked, "What kind of trouble did you encounter that could make you, Lu Tianping Laozu, so troubled? I'm afraid it must be something earth-shattering, right?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "I'm afraid Huangli Island will need Brother Lei to hold the fort again." Sixth Brother Lei had just condensed his Dharma power, so he still needed time to consolidate his cultivation. Therefore, Lu Ping did not stay in the secret room for too long. After leaving the secret room, the entire Huangli Island suddenly shook. Lu Ping was slightly startled. When he spread out his divine telekinesis, he heard Lu Qiner's clear and melodious chirp with a trace of joy. Lu Ping's heart moved, and he appeared in a call behind the cave residence. As Huangli Island expanded, the terrain of Huangli Island also changed. Lu Ping's cave residence was located in the center of the entire island. The fiery light that soared into the sky flashed from the mountain valley, almost illuminating the entire sky in crimson red. A huge cyan swan was hovering excitedly above the mountain valley, shuttling through the fiery light from time to time, as if it was bathing in fire. When Lu Ping arrived, Lu Qiner finally descended from the sky and said excitedly, "Big brother, look! This is the fire vein that I stimulated and nurtured." The call was the exit of the fire vein, and the tumbling magma was like boiling water. This was actually a small-scale fire vein. Lu Ping looked at Lu Qina with a surprised expression and said, Qina, didn't you say that the fire spirit pearl was just a miniature spirit pearl? It was already good enough to nurture a miniature fire vein. How did it turn out to be a small-scale fire vein? From the looks of it, the quality of the fire vein is rather good. The fire is extremely pure, Lu Qina said embarrassedly. Qina has mistaken. After all, the fire spirit pearl is even rarer than the spirit amassing pearl. Qina only described it in my inherited memories. However, without our phoenix race's bloodline inheritance secret art, it wouldn't be easy to nurture this fire vein. Lu Ping knew that Lu Qina was speaking the truth. The fire phoenix race was publicly acknowledged as the elves of fire in the cultivation world. Although Lu Qina didn't have a pure fire phoenix bloodline, her cultivation might not be inferior to the direct descendants of the fire phoenix race. Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, Qina, I might be going to the East Sea soon. Do you want to follow me? Lu Qina looked at the fire vein in the middle of the kernel. This was the new home that she had painstakingly built for herself. For this, she had pursued Debao on Huangli Island for an entire year. Only then did she obtain enough treasures to execute the fire phoenix's secret art and nurture the fire spirit pearl into a fire vein. However, Lu Qina also knew that Lu Ping might bring her to the fire phoenix race on this trip to the North Sea. This was an opportunity for her, and it was related to the growth of her cultivation. Lu Qina naturally didn't want to miss it. Wherever Big Brother goes, I will go. Lu Ping smiled and said, You stay here for a period of time first. There's no hurry to go now. Ignoring Lu Qina's cheers, Lu Ping turned around and returned to his cave abode, entering his secret cultivation room. Right now, the spirit vein on Huangli Island was converging into the third mid-sized spirit vein. The spiritual energy in Lu Ping's cultivation room was so dense that it could choke an ordinary person to death. In the underground spring where the spiritual energy originated from, Lu Dagui was sleeping in the water. In this spirit pond that Lu Dagui created, 18 willing fish Dao soldiers had already advanced into the blood condensation realm. Some of the more outstanding ones had even advanced into the mid-stage of the blood condensation realm. There were 36 willing fish of the second generation that had survived, and they were now at the late stage of the blood refining realm. The 81 willing fish of the third generation had only just reached the blood refining realm and were not qualified to become Dao soldiers yet. These willing fish were a gift from the Tianxian sect to Lu Ping when he was traveling in the Middle Earth. The willing fish was one of the strongest Dao soldiers in the cultivation world, but it was also one of the most difficult to cultivate. After decades of cultivation, even though Lu Ping was rich, he only managed to cultivate 3 generations of willing fish, and there were only slightly more than 100 of them. Most of the time, these Dao soldiers were taken care of by Lu Dagui. Lu Ping took out a water bowl and sucked it towards the pond. Lu Dagui, the willing fish, and the spiritual water in the pond were all sucked into the water bowl by Lu Ping. The spring gurgled and the water began to fill up the entire pond again. After leaving the cave abode, Lu Ping once again summoned all his disciples. Looking at the disciples below him, Lu Ping said, I will be going on a long journey in the near future. This time, it will take at least 3 to 5 years, and at most, it will take several decades. All of you must be careful and diligent. Don't let your cultivation fall behind. The disciples all bowed their heads in agreement. The eldest disciple, Wang Xuanqi, said, I wonder where Master will be going. We brothers and sisters can accompany you. Lu Ping shook his head and said, This time, I will be going to the Eastern Sea first. I don't know where I will be going after this. As the eldest disciple of the Hearing Surf Manor, you need to take care of the affairs on Huangli Island on my behalf. The cultivation of you brothers and sisters is still too weak. You will only be a burden if you go. Lu Ping ignored the embarrassment on the disciples' faces and said, The Northern Sea is currently in troubled times. It is not good for all of you to cultivate diligently. You need to go out often to gain experience. Although it is dangerous, it will be of great benefit to your future cultivation. The disciples all listened attentively. A satisfied smile appeared on Lu Ping's face, and he continued, Master has a few treasures here that I don't normally use. Today, I will give them all to you. However, don't blindly rely on the power of these treasures to bully others. You must know that your own cultivation is the foundation. Without a deep cultivation, even if you have a treasure, you will only be able to display some of its power. When the disciples heard that Lu Ping wanted to divide the treasures, their faces lit up with joy. Lu Ping's face sank and he gave them another lecture before handing over a spirit sealing box and the water bowl containing the willing fish to Wang Xuanqi. He said, Xuanqi, you are my eldest disciple. Currently your cultivation is at the 3rd layer of core forging. The foundation you have accumulated is enough for you to step into the mid-core forging stage. However, the spirit sealing box I am giving you contains a low-grade heaven gold stone. Seeing the awkward expression on Wang Xuanqi's face, Lu Ping smiled and said, Of course, I'm not asking you to use a heaven-grade origin treasure on your first try. Instead, I hope that you can use this heaven-grade origin treasure on your second try and break through to the late core forging realm. Hearing this, Wang Xuanqi heaved a sigh of relief and said, I will definitely not disappoint you, Master. Ordinary practitioners who could refine a low-grade heaven gold stone for the 3rd time would already be considered a reserved Dharma adept of the sect. Chapter 1001. Lu Ping did not directly prepare the spiritual items for Wang Xuanqi to advance to the mid-stage core forging realm. He hoped that they could obtain it through their own efforts and not blindly rely on Master's help. At the same time, he placed the heavenly gold stone far in front of him to encourage his disciples. Lu Ping handed the water bowl to Wang Xuanqi and said, This willing fish is a Dao weapon that Master specially prepared for Huangli Island. It's just that this Dao weapon has not been fully formed yet. Master has no time to spare, so I will temporarily leave this Dao weapon in your care. After handing the heavenly gold stone and willing fish to Wang Xuanqi, Lu Ping looked at Tian Xianwei and said, I heard that you have made great progress in the Yingshan Immortal Academy. You have already mastered mid-stage core forging realm pills and are now refining late-stage core forging realm pills? Tian Xianwei said. It's all thanks to Master's guidance and cultivation. Disciple has concentrated on studying Master's pill refinement techniques to achieve this. Lu Ping nodded and said, I have passed on all my pill refinement techniques to you. However, Master still has 2 great pill refinement techniques. I have already taught you the spiritual explosion technique, so today, I will teach you the spirit fire smelting purification technique. This secret technique is very important, so you must use it carefully. You should study it carefully after you leave. Tian Xianwei took the jade slip and thanked Lu Ping. However, he saw Lu Ping open his palm and a small pill furnace appeared in Lu Ping's palm. Tian Xuanyue's eyes widened when he saw the pill furnace in Lu Ping's hand. Even the other disciples sucked in a breath of cold air. Top-grade pill furnace, flying rainbow cauldron. Although Junling already had 2 magic treasure pill furnaces and the number of high-grade pill furnaces had increased, it did not mean that Junling had enough pill furnaces. On the contrary, with the expansion of Junling and the increase in the number of pill refinement masters, both pills and pill furnaces were still in short supply. The status of top-grade pill furnaces in the sect did not decrease but increased. Who would have known that Lu Ping actually had a top-grade alchemy furnace on him? In fact, what everyone didn't know was that Junling actually had 3 magic treasure pill furnaces. In addition to Lu Ping's Na Chuan cauldron and Tian Lu Laozu's treasure cauldron, Junling had also obtained a treasure cauldron that had condensed 3 treasured seals in the Ying Tian dojo. However, this treasured cauldron was eventually obtained by celestial phenomenon Laozu. Even Lu Ping had no idea what celestial phenomenon Laozu used it for. Lu Ping noticed the expressions on the disciples' faces. He smiled faintly and said to Tian Xianwei, Although I prepared this soaring rainbow cauldron for you, it won't be easy for you to obtain it. I will leave this cauldron in fellow Taoist ladies' hands. If you can't concoct a late core forging medicinal pellet that satisfies him, you won't be able to obtain it. Lu Ping paused for a moment and continued. Originally, Master prepared a heaven and earth spiritual fire for you. Unfortunately, a spiritual fire is of great use to Master. Therefore, I will leave this flying rainbow cauldron in front of you. Let's see if you can obtain it or not. Lu Ping looked at his third direct disciple, Du Jialuo. Then he took out a jade slip and a jade pendant from his storage artifact and said, "This jade slip is the cultivation method for the fifth earth true body that I obtained from martial Uncle Tian Kong. The fifth earth true body is the divine ability that martial Uncle Tian Kong is proud of. It is a set of earth attribute spells that can be cultivated to the supreme divine ability level. Currently, martial Uncle Tian Kong is only one step away from being able to cultivate it to the supreme divine ability level. The other people who cultivate this divine ability are your martial Uncle Tian Shan and martial Uncle Lu Xiantian. Both of them have deep attainments in this divine ability. In the future, if you have any questions, you can ask the two of them." Then, he took out the jade pendant and said, "This psychic jade pendant is an extremely good treasure for core forging cultivators. It was given to me by your martial Uncle Xian Ru. After that, it was upgraded by your martial Uncle Xian Lian. Although it is only a psychic level magic treasure, its true value is close to that of a spirit nurturing magic treasure. Now, this jade pendant is no longer of much use to me, so I will give it to you for your cultivation." Du Jialuo bowed and thanked Lu Ping. Then, he heard Lu Ping continue, "Debao will follow me to the East Sea. All of Debao's businesses on Huangli Island will be managed by Xian Qi. You just need to take over the underground auction. Now, there is no need to be so sneaky. Just hold it openly on Huangli Island. Our sex Lao Zu and your martial Uncle Lei will protect you." Lu Ping turned to look at Fang Wei and Fang Xia. He smiled and said, "The two of you have grown quite fast. You're almost catching up to your eldest senior brother. Originally, I should praise you, but I don't approve of your pursuit of speed. Instead, you should spend more time polishing your foundation. Otherwise, when your cultivation reaches a certain level in the future, you won't have enough strength, and it will be difficult for you to advance any further." Lu Ping's words were not polite at all. His words caused the two siblings' faces to turn red. Lu Ping had no choice but to do so. The two siblings' aptitudes were not the best, but they cultivated diligently. However, they were too ambitious and lacked patience. They only pursued speed. Compared to other cultivators, their foundation was solid. However, compared to Wang Qi and Du Jialuo, they were far behind. Lu Ping waved his hand in front of him. Two flying swords appeared from the spatial door like swimming fish. They circled around Lu Ping's body. They were the autumn dew swords in Lu Ping's hand. This pair of spirit-nurturing grade flying swords had accompanied Lu Ping for decades. If it weren't for the fact that the quality of the swords could no longer be improved, Lu Ping would not have stopped using them after obtaining the thin water-flowing sword. Lu Ping thought for a moment. He guided the two flying swords slightly and pointed at the stone wall at the entrance of the cave. The autumn dew swords drew a white arc in front of the two swords and disappeared into the stone wall. Looking at the confused siblings, Lu Ping said, "You two have cultivated my sex joint attack secret technique. The autumn dew eerie swords were once my favorite weapon. Now, I've embedded the swords into the stone wall. One day, if you two can extract the swords without damaging the stone wall, the swords will belong to you too." The siblings were happy and worried at the same time. They were happy because the charming autumn water sword was a spirit-nurturing grade mystic treasure, which was already considered an important treasure in Jinling sect. But they were worried because Lu Ping had clearly set up a test for them. They didn't expect the siblings to obtain the mystic treasure so easily. It wouldn't be easy to pass the test set up by Immortal Water Sword. However, thinking about the treasures that Lu Ping had left for his three direct disciples, it was clear that Lu Ping had placed the treasures in front of the disciples' cultivation. Every time they made some progress, there would be a benefit waiting for them. But if they slacked off, then they would naturally have no chance of obtaining the treasures. In front of the last registered disciple, Xing Wu, Lu Ping took out landslide and weighed it in his hand with reluctance. This landslide has been with me for the longest time. Although I have managed to condense the 7th restriction and upgrade it to spirit nurturing grade, it is extremely difficult to continue to upgrade it. It is extremely rare to find a top-grade spirit material with both water and gold attributes. However, this treasure is suitable for your cultivation method. If you can successfully advance to the mid-core forging stage in the future, you can take this treasure and refine it. After assigning tasks to the disciples, Lu Ping stood up and went to Tianling Mountain. Originally, he wanted to see if his teacher had recovered, but he did not expect to receive a message from Laozi Jiang Tianlin as soon as he arrived at Tianling Mountain. He asked if Lu Ping had already set off for the Eastern Sea, and if he had not, he would immediately head to Scarlet Mist Island. Lu Ping was bewildered, but he did not hesitate at all. He turned around and walked toward the teleportation formation in front of the Heaven Spirit Hall. With a flash of white light, Lu Ping reappeared on Scarlet Mist Island that was shrouded in red mist. Currently, Tian Lin, Xiang Lu, Tian Qing, Tian Qin, and Tian Shan had gathered on Scarlet Mist Island. Other than Tianling Mountain, it could be said that Jinling was the most impregnable place. As soon as Lu Ping emerged from the teleportation formation in front of a mountain, he just happened to see a group of Mara charging toward where Jinling was stationed. The Jinling cultivators on Scarlet Mist Island all rose into the air and began to activate the protective formation along the coast in preparation to defend against the Mara's charge. However, this group of Maras was not particularly strong, but they were extremely fast. It seemed that they wanted to charge into Scarlet Mist Island before the protective formation was completely activated. The cultivators in Jinling cried out in alarm. As soon as the protective formation was activated, it had yet to unleash its full power. However, over 10 large Maras had already arrived. The various magic treasures on their bodies all shot toward the cultivators in Jinling. Just as Lu Ping's soul sense charged toward the group of Maras, a soul sense hidden in the air also charged toward Lu Ping's soul like a hungry wolf. The blood demon's soul-devouring ability? Lu Ping sneered. His divine sense suddenly ignited with oily green flames of nothingness that could only be seen by divine sense. The hidden blood demon sensed something amiss and wanted to retreat. However, how could Lu Ping let this opportunity slip away? His divine sense abruptly charged forward and a shrill roar suddenly rang out from the void several li away. Next, a blood-red figure flashed across the horizon before disappearing. Lu Ping did not care about it. He knew that every time Mara attacked, there would be a bloody Mara hiding in the void. His appearance would surely attract the attention of the bloody Mara that was lingering outside Scarlet Mist Island. Although Lu Ping would not attack the ordinary Mara, he did not mind making the bloody Mara that was hiding suffer. Just as the blood demon was defeated and fled, Lu Ping's divine sense immediately sensed that 2 bloody Mara-level divine senses were once again paying attention to him. However, this time, the other party was clearly more cautious. They were only monitoring him to see if he would attack the ordinary Mara that was attacking Scarlet Mist Island. Naturally, Lu Ping would not break the unwritten rule between the cultivation world and Mara. However, just because he did not attack, it did not mean that Lu Ping would not interfere. A young man, who was slightly shorter than Lu Ping but several times more muscular than Lu Ping, walked out from behind Lu Ping with a bronze bell in his hand. Chapter 1002. Although Debeo still had the face of a young man, the 2 small tufts of mustache below his nose made him look a little more mature. In addition, he had managed the Huangli Island auction house and other businesses over the past few years, causing Debeo to look a little more mature. Debeo held a copper bell in his hand, walked a few steps towards the battle on the sea, and then suddenly hit the big bell in his hand. Duong! A ripple visible to the naked eye extended in the void, and in a moment, it had spread to the battle between the Jinling cultivators and Mara cultivators. The Jinling cultivators only felt pain in their eardrums, followed by dizziness, and immediately woke up. On the other hand, the Mara cultivators on the opposite side covered their ears and cried out in pain. Many of the weaker Mara cultivators were dispersed by the sound of the bell, and fell from the sky one after another. They were surrounded and killed by the Jinling cultivators who woke up before them. In just a moment, the situation of the whole battle suddenly reversed. A large number of Mara fell, and the remaining big Mara cultivators with deeper cultivation were mostly able to resist the sound of the bell. Although they were dazed for a moment, they quickly recovered. Even so, because a large number of Mara cultivators with weaker cultivation were killed, the Jinling cultivators had a numerical advantage against the remaining big Mara cultivators. They quickly gained the upper hand on the battlefield. After killing 3 or 4 big Mara cultivators in a row, the remaining Mara cultivators could no longer resist the pressure of Jinling cultivators, and they all fled to the sea. When the Jinling cultivators returned to Scarlet Mist Island, Lu Ping had already arrived at the temporary cave residence that Jiang Tianlin and Laozu had opened on Scarlet Mist Island. "You got the method to refine the Tsunghai Bell?" When Jiang Tianlin and Laozu saw Lu Ping asking, Xiang Lu and Laozu also looked at the copper bell in Lu Ping's hand in surprise. It was obviously a newly upgraded spiritual magic treasure. Lu Ping was not surprised at all. He handed the copper bell to Jiang Tianlin and said, "Yes, I found a jade slip in the Tsunghai relic. I wasn't sure at first, but after asking senior brother Xian Lian for help, I didn't expect the copper bell to have the same effect as the Tsunghai bell. It's just that the grade of the copper bell is too low, and to continue to improve the quality of the Tsunghai bell, the spiritual materials needed are extremely rare and strange. It's not realistic to refine this magic treasure on a large scale to defend against Mara." Jiang Tianlin and Laozu passed the copper bell to Xiang Lu, Tianqing, and the other Laozu. Finally, they returned the copper bell to Lu Ping. Jiang Tianlin and Laozu said, "So Xian Lian has already mastered the method to refine the Tsunghai bell?" Lu Ping nodded and asked, "Uncle, why did you call me here this time?" Jiang Tianlin and Laozu asked in a deep voice, "Do you know about the AI Clan Island?" Lu Ping shook his head in surprise and said, "I don't know. Isn't the AI Clan Island one of the small forces in the North Sea? It's said that it has a close relationship with Tianhua sect. Did something happen?" Tianqing Laozu interrupted. "Just yesterday, the entire AI Clan Island was slaughtered by the Crystal Palace and Xianling sect. Hundreds of cultivators on the AI Clan Island, including the Dharma idol Laozu, were all killed. It's said that only the daughter of the AI Clan head, Ai Shuyao, was rescued by a mysterious female cultivator." Lu Ping was shocked speechless. Lu Ping was quite familiar with the AI Clan Island. He was friends with the AI Clan's third-generation disciple, Ai Butao, and the cross-dressing Ai Shuyao. After a while, Lu Ping asked, "Why?" After all, the AI Clan of the North Sea was a family with a high status. Although the Crystal Palace and Xianling sect were powerful, they couldn't exterminate the whole clan for no reason. They had to at least come up with a dignified reason to convince people. Moreover, the AI clan was backed by the Tianhua sect of the Central Plains. Jiang Tianlin smiled bitterly and said, "They colluded with the demon race and acted as a middleman for the East Sea enemies of Tianhua sect and the Crystal Palace, the Green Sea Snakes. On the day of the extermination, both the Tianhua sect and the snake demon race were present. This time, even the Tianhua sect was involved. Although the few snake demons that died were not Green Sea snakes, according to Wu Shihuan, who participated in the extermination of the AI Clan Island, the mysterious female cultivator who rescued Ai Shuyao was Chu Hailan, a Dharma adept from the fire snake race of the Green Sea Snakes." "Chu Hailan?" Lu Ping was surprised when he heard this. "How can it be him? How could Wu Shihuan be so sure?" Jiang Tianlin and the other Laozu saw Lu Ping's reaction and looked at each other. Lu Ping was shocked and said, "Why? Is Chu Hailan on Scarlet Mist Island now?" Tianshan Laozu said unhappily. "This woman came to the island and ran amok. Several disciples of our sect were injured by her. Moreover, this woman is very powerful. In the end, Senior Jiang had to step in to defeat her. However, this woman did not go far. Instead, she said that she wanted to see you." Otherwise, those disciples who were poisoned would not be able to keep their lives. After saying that, Gui Tianshan couldn't help but complain. How do you know this woman? She is an authentic descendant of the Green Sea Snakes. If the Crystal Palace knew that our sect has dealings with the Green Sea Snakes, I'm afraid there will be big trouble. Hearing that several disciples of his sect were injured by Chu Hailan, Lu Ping's face suddenly became gloomy. He said, "Let's go and see the injured cultivators first." Although the natal poison of the Green Sea Snakes was the best in the world, Lu Ping's Myriad Poison Meteorite Power Gang and Myriad Poison Serum were known as the mother of all poisons in the world. Moreover, Chu Hailan did not kill these disciples. These disciples more or less carried the flames of the dark prison poisonous fire, which could resist the snake poison in their bodies. Therefore, although everyone had lost their fighting power, their lives were not in danger. Although Mei Tianqin had developed an elixir that could prevent the fire poison from eroding, this elixir could only last for a period of time. In the process of refining this elixir, a lot of spiritual herbs would inevitably be consumed. Therefore, it was not as convenient as the dark prison poisonous fire. Lu Ping easily resolved the snake poison in everyone's body. The disciples thanked him one after another, which made Lu Ping's prestige rise to a higher level. On the outermost volcano of Junling's sphere of influence on Scarlet Mist Island, Lu Ping suddenly appeared and looked at the layers of ripples in the magma crater. "Come out," Lu Ping said coldly. "Hee, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Chu Hailan's seductive voice suddenly came from the tumbling magma. A stream of magma soared into the sky and rushed towards Lu Ping's face. Lu Ping's expression remained unchanged. The magma had already cooled down before it reached Lu Ping. It turned into volcanic ash and rustled down. From beginning to end, Lu Ping did not make a move. A hundreds of feet long fiery serpent soared out of the magma, its crimson scales sparkling under the sunlight, looking like rubies embedded in its body. The fire snake suddenly turned into a ball of flame, and a seductive woman slowly emerged from the flame. It was the Dharma adept of the Green Sea Snakes, Chu Hailan, whom Lu Ping had met in the Tianxian sect. The North Sea Water Sword Sage's reputation has not only shaken the human training world, but is also well known among the demon clans of the major training worlds. I didn't have much time to spar with Lu Daoyu during the last meeting in Middle-earth, but now I don't even have the right to fight. Chu Hailan smiled and exuded the charm of a mature woman. Looking at the magma pool at the mouth of the volcano behind her, she said with some reluctance, "This Scarlet Mist Island is indeed a good place. Bathing in it makes one's entire body feel refreshed. Even the volcanic island where the Fire Phoenix clan resides is nothing compared to this. No wonder even the Fire Phoenix clan has taken notice of this Scarlet Mist Island in the East Sea." Upon hearing this, Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. This was an important piece of news. Although the Fire Phoenix clan could not be compared to the Green Sea Snakes, they were still the second largest demon clan in the East Sea. Their strength was not inferior to those large sects with a long history in Middle-earth. If the Fire Phoenix clan had really taken a liking to this Scarlet Mist Island, there would be another storm. He had to inform the sect about this so that they could make early preparations. Lu Ping frowned and said, "Fellow Chu, there is a difference between humans and demons. You wouldn't have come this time just to compliment me, right?" Seeing the impatient look on Lu Ping's face, Chu Hailan no longer teased him. Her expression became serious, and her seductive charm was swept away. Instead, she had a dignified and graceful aura. She said, "This time, I need Lu Daoyu's help. Now that the road to the East Sea has been blocked by the Crystal Palace and Xianling sect, all the sects in the North Sea will not provoke the Crystal Palace. If AI clan's little sister and I want to return to the East Sea, we can only ask for help from Lu Daoyu." Lu Ping sneered and said, "What a joke. Other sects can't provoke the Crystal Palace, but can our sect? No matter if it's the Heavenly Moon sect or the Green Sea Snakes, they are all famous forces in the cultivation world. You can wait for these two sects to come to rescue you," Chu Hailan said helplessly. "Since that's the case, I can only wait for the cultivators of my clan to come to rescue me on this Scarlet Mist Island. Lu Ping's gaze towards Chu Hailan suddenly shrank. He said, You dare to threaten me? If the Crystal Palace and Xianling sect knew that Chu Hailan was hiding on the Scarlet Mist Island, then Jinling would definitely not be able to escape responsibility. Hearing Chu Hailan say this, Lu Ping was naturally furious. Chu Hailan was stimulated by Lu Ping's murderous aura. She was secretly shocked by Lu Ping's tyrannical strength. Even when she faced Wu Shihuan in the past, he did not give her such great pressure. Could it be that the person in front of her was even more powerful than Wu Shihuan? Although Chu Hailan was afraid in her heart, she still resisted. If I really want to threaten you, I can use the Samling as an excuse. Now that the entire North Sea is searching for the Ai family's sister and me, and your Jinling is rising so strongly, you will definitely become a thorn in the side of the Crystal Palace. Don't you think that this is a chance to secretly form an alliance with the Green Sea Snakes and the Heavenly Moon sect? Moreover, the Samling will eventually return to the clan to receive the inheritance of the clan. If you help me, I will help you. Chapter 1003. So your husband was killed by Huang Shijun and others who ambushed him after he was defeated by Wu Shihuan? That's right. Chu Hailan's expression did not change in the slightest as she said, Although my husband fled in defeat, that Wu Shihuan might not have had it easy either. It's just that I didn't think that the mighty direct lineage cultivator of the Crystal Palace would be so despicable, actually setting up an ambush along the way. That husband of mine was already heavily injured in the first place, so how could he have withstood Huang Shijun's ambush? In the end, he still perished. Instead, Huang Shijun became famous after he single-handedly slew my husband. Lu Ping saw that Chu Hailan had chased him from the East Sea to the Central region, and then to the North Sea. It could be seen that the relationship between the couple was very deep. However, Lu Ping couldn't feel the grief of her husband's death from Chu Hailan. From the beginning to the end, Chu Hailan told Lu Ping the process as if it was an unrelated story. Although Lu Ping was full of doubts, it was not appropriate for him to ask, so he inevitably showed his doubts on his face. Chu Hailan was so smart that she had already understood what Lu Ping was thinking. She said, Do you feel that I'm very indifferent to my husband's death, but chasing him for thousands of miles seems contradictory? Lu Ping felt embarrassed that Chu Hailan had seen through his thoughts. However, what he was doing now was like walking on the edge of a bottomless abyss, so he couldn't afford to be careless. So, although he seemed hesitant, he still nodded. A trace of worry appeared on Chu Hailan's face as she said, There's nothing I can do about it. My husband and I aren't actually married. Furthermore, our marriage was decided by our elders. I've only met my husband 3 to 5 times, so how could we have feelings for each other? Lu Ping asked curiously. In that case, why are you so eager to avenge him? Chu Hailan smiled bitterly. It all started because of me. When I was traveling in human form, Wu Shihuan came to pester me because he coveted my beauty. He chased me all the way to the outer endless sea. I was no match for Wu Shihuan, so I could only use my clan's secret technique to ask for help. Coincidentally, my fiancé came looking for me, and we fought a great battle when we met. However, I didn't expect that my transformation technique, which I thought was brilliant, would be seen through by Wu Shihuan. He set up a trap to lure my husband here. After I was entangled by Ma Shifang, my husband was defeated by Wu Shihuan, and he was killed by Huang Shijun on the way to escape. Chu Hailan paused and continued. Ma Shifang's strength was similar to mine. When I saw my husband being defeated, I naturally escaped. Fortunately, Wu Shihuan was also injured, so I was able to escape unscathed. However, when I returned to the clan, I was reprimanded by the Water Snake clan. They thought that it was because of me that my husband died. My Fire Snake clan is weak to begin with. When the 2 clans united by marriage, we also asked for help from the Water Snake clan. Now, things have backfired. I can only use the excuse of avenging my husband to travel for many years in order to avoid the disputes within the clan. Lu Ping didn't expect Chu Hailan to have such an experience. But to be able to fight Wu Shihuan to such an extent, it seemed like her fiancé's status in the Water Snake clan wasn't low. Otherwise, the Emerald Sea Spirit Snake clan wouldn't have vented their anger on Chu Hailan because of her fiancé's death. At this time, Lu Ping didn't know what to say, but he was still a little nervous. With Chu Hailan's current situation among the Green Sea Snakes, would she still be able to help Sam Ling obtain the inheritance? Chu Hailan seemed to be able to understand Lu Ping's thoughts. Seeing that Lu Ping didn't speak, she quickly guessed his thoughts again. She asked, "Are you worried about Sam Ling's inheritance?" Lu Ping was a little vulnerable to this woman's intuition, so he could only nod and admit it. Chu Hailan smiled and said, "With the qualifications and strength of these three little guys, you should not be worried about whether they can accept the inheritance, but whether you can bring them out after accepting the inheritance." Lu Ping heard the meaning in Chu Hailan's heart and said in surprise, "Is there really a way?" Chu Hailan nodded and said, "This is also what I admire about you. Sam Ling grew up with you, and you were able to resist the temptation of the Green Sea Snakes. From the beginning to the end, you didn't put any restriction on their divine thoughts, making them your spiritual slaves. Instead, you and Sam Ling are like father and son. This is your biggest opportunity." Lu Ping was delighted and asked quickly, "What do you mean?" "Followers," Chu Hailan explained. "At the time when the seventh ancestor opened the sky, the concept of the human and demon races was extremely vague. The seventh ancestor himself might have been a member of the demon race. Later on, even though there were differences between the two races, the relationship between the two races was still equal. Many of the ancient Almighty people simply abandoned the concept of race. At that time, the Almighty people had many followers. The Almighty people of the human race had many followers of the demon race, and the Almighty people of the demon race also had many followers of the human race. These followers even became the embryonic form of the human race's sections. At that time, the Almighty people treated their followers as equals, without discrimination. However, later on, the human heart became more complex, and the demon heart also became more transparent. Thus, this kind of follower, which was built on trust, changed into a method of slavery that controlled the life and death of the Almighty people. Lu Ping seemed to understand a little and said, that is to say, as long as Sam Ling admits that he is your follower, and is not forced by you, this matter will be considered half done." "Half?" Chu Hailan nodded and said, "Yes, half. After all, Sam Ling was born in the Green Sea Snake and has a pure bloodline. He is considered one of the best rising stars among the Green Sea Snakes. Do you think the big shots in the clan will be willing to let such an excellent junior follow you, a human?" Lu Ping couldn't help but ask. "Then what should I do?" Chu Hailan giggled and said, "That depends on whether you have the strength. As Sam Ling's follower, you must have the strength to protect your own follower when necessary. If you can't provide this kind of protection yourself, how can others rest assured to let their juniors follow you?" Chu Hailan then changed his tone and said, "Of course, with your reputation as the North Sea Water Sword Celestial, the big shots in the clan will look up to you." Lu Ping couldn't help but smile bitterly. The big shots in the Green Sea Snake clan only needed to think about the strength of the Crystal Palace to understand why he would be looked up to by these big shots. After Lu Ping roughly told Jiang Tianlin and Lao Zu about Chu Hailan's matter, the next day, he received a transmission jade slip from Celestial Phenomenon Lao Zu and Lu Tianling Lao Zu. However, other than asking about the recent battle situation with Mara on Scarlet Mist Island, there was nothing else mentioned. Jiang Tianlin showed the jade slip to Lu Ping, and Lu Ping immediately understood. He ordered Chu Hailan to find Ai Shuyao, who was hiding in a secret place, and cast a secret invisibility technique on the two of them. They traveled unimpeded all the way to Tianling Mountain. Along the way, the detection restrictions in the various Jinling arrays were not triggered at all, and the few Dharma adepts also ignored it. As for the other core forging adepts, how could they see through Lu Ping's secret technique? when the teleportation array was activated, and after a flash of light, the three of them were already on Jingzhi Island. "Bastard, you're courting death!" As soon as Lu Ping and the other two arrived on Jingzhi Island, they heard Tiankong Laozu's earth-shattering roar, followed by a shocking murderous intent that swept through the entire island. Chu Hailan had already known beforehand that there was an extremely strong mid-dharma adept from Zhenling's sect stationed on Jingzhi Island. When she heard Patriarch Tiankang's sudden shout, she instinctively circulated all the inner yuan in her body. Her aura was just as strong and violent, which gave Patriarch Tiankang a fright. The murderous aura that filled the sky instantly froze. Lu Ping, on the other hand, knew that this was a misunderstanding, but there was no time to explain now. In a flash, he had already disappeared. At this time, Chu Hailan also knew that she had made a mistake, and she hurriedly retracted her aura. However, her soaring demonic aura could no longer be concealed. Tiankong Laozu, who was originally about to leave the island, turned around and charged towards Chu Hailan. Ji Xianxian stuffed the last top-grade spirit stone into the wooden bird puppet beneath his feet. The wooden bird, which was originally dispirited and unpracticed, glowed brightly. It flapped its wings more nimbly, and its speed instantly doubled. Ji Xuanxuan's heart was bleeding. Ji Xianxian's heart was bleeding. The 3 top-grade spirit stones he had were obtained from Lu Ping after wasting half a kilogram of saliva. He didn't expect that the 3 top-grade spirit stones would be wasted on the short journey from Hearing Waves Island to Jingzhi Island. This was not what made Ji Xuanxuan's heart ache the most. What pained him the most was the wooden bird puppet beneath his feet. It should be known that the wings of this wooden bird puppet were made from the branches and leaves that Ji Xianxian had saved from the gray willow tree when he was creating Lu Ping's avatar. Needless to say, it was impossible for it to escape so far under the pursuit of a blood shura. However, this puppet had already reached its limit under Ji Xuanxuan's continuous overloading, and was already on the verge of becoming useless. He could only hope that it could persevere until Jingzhi Island. Otherwise, not only would he lose his life, even Soundwaves Island would probably be completely slaughtered. A blood-red light was getting closer and closer behind Ji Xianxian. Ji Xianxian could see the hideous smile on the blood shura's face hidden in the blood-red light. Ji Xianxian had no choice but to release the last spirit snake puppet on him, hoping that it could buy him some time. Jingzhi Island was only a few hundred kilometers away. Explode! Ji Xuanxuan's eyes were bloodshot. Seeing that the spine of the spirit snake puppet made from a branch of the gray willow tree could not withstand more than 2 or 3 blows from the blood shura, Ji Xianxian gritted his teeth and detonated the puppet. Boom! The spirit snake puppet exploded, and the spine of the gray willow tree turned into 12 bone spikes that shot towards the blood shura. Ji Xuanxuan's face paled, and a mouthful of blood sprayed onto the back of the puppet bird beneath his feet. Jingzhi Island was finally close, but before Ji Xianxian could reveal the slightest hint of joy, the blood shura suddenly broke through the blockade of the 12 bone spikes and chased after Ji Xianxian a few hundred meters away. The primordial spirit treasure in his hand flew out, turning into a flying wheel that slashed towards Ji Xuanxuan's back. Chapter 1004. Die, evildoer! Even though Old Ancestor Heavenly Peace couldn't detect Chu Hailan's background in that instant, the demonic aura that Chu Hailan's aura burst out just now couldn't be wrong. Even though Old Ancestor Heavenly Peace sensed that Ji Xianxian was in imminent danger, the demonic aura that suddenly appeared in the jolting hibernating island made Old Ancestor Heavenly Peace hesitate between Ji Xianxian and the jolting hibernating island. However, in the end, Old Ancestor Heavenly Peace still had no choice but to protect the jolting hibernating island. Jingzhi Island was a place Zhenling had managed to protect in the fallen secret land for several generations. It was also the symbol of Zhenling's interest in the several spirit stone veins in the fallen secret land. The mountain-splitting axe slashed down with a mountain-splitting and sea-splitting power, scaring Chu Hailan to the point that her face turned pale. Although Chu Hailan was born in the Fire Snake clan, which was the weakest compared to the other green sea snake tribes, Chu Halen's strength was excellent. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to compete with the direct descendants of the Crystal Palace. However, in front of Tian Kong Laozu, who had the mountain-splitting axe, it was not enough. A flame rose from the soles of Chu Halen's feet. Countless flames escaped in all directions in the shape of fire snakes, but they were still cut down by 2/3 by Tian Kong Laozu's axe. Fire spirit escape! You are the green sea snakes? Old ancestor Tian Kong was experienced and knowledgeable after all, and he had stayed in the East Sea numerous times before, so he naturally had a good eye for things. He immediately recognized that what Chu Hailan had executed was one of the secret escape techniques of the Jade Sea Spirit Snake race, and the attacks in his hands couldn't help but stop. If it was someone else, Tian Kong Laozu would have killed him. However, the person in front of him was the Green Sea Snake. At this time, Tian Kong Laozu remembered that there should be 3 people who had been teleported here. However, there were only 2 women in front of him. That extremely familiar aura had disappeared. Tian Kong Laozu scanned with his divine will and instantly heaved a sigh of relief. He said, "You guys followed Tianping here?" The remaining fire snakes regrouped a few hundred feet away. Chu Hailan appeared there in a sorry state. He said, "Senior, please don't be angry. I came here with Lu Tianping." At this time, although Tian Kong Laozu had the intention to rush out of the island as soon as possible to receive Ji Xianxian, a green sea snake suddenly appeared on the island. Furthermore, it came from Jinling's own teleportation array. This caused Tian Kong Laozu to not dare to go out of Jingzhi Island without understanding the situation. Rumble! Whoosh! Whoosh! The intense fluctuations of the battle quickly attracted everyone's attention. Ji Xianxian was finally saved the moment he was killed by the flywheel. Ji Xianxian, who had narrowly escaped death, couldn't be bothered to feel the slightest bit of joy towards the pair of familiar flying swords. His true essence was on the verge of drying up as he struggled to support the wooden bird puppet beneath his feet to fiercely flap its wings a few times. Then, the wooden bird puppet swayed and crashed towards the Jingshi Island. Crash! Before the cultivators on Jingzhi Island could rush over to receive him, the entire wooden bird crashed into the ground at an extremely fast speed and then fell apart. The cultivators from Jinling who rushed over to receive him were Ya Yong, Du Feng, Xian Ling, and the others. The few of them had accompanied Yao Yong to participate in the Fantasy Spirit Cities auction. Their original intention was to see if they could find a way to restore Laozu's origin. In the end, although they found nothing, Yao Yong insisted on staying in the Eastern Sea. He still didn't give up hope, so Du Feng and Xian Ling also stayed here to accompany him. The 3 of them saw Ji Xuanxuan's entire body bounce off the moment the wooden bird landed. Then, he rolled on the ground several times without any care for his image. In the end, he lay on the ground and didn't get up. The hearts of Yao Yong and the others sank as they hurriedly rushed over. However, they heard Ji Xianxian groaning as he lay on the ground without a care for his image. It was obvious that he didn't suffer any serious injuries, but because his true essence was exhausted, he was unable to support a protective spell like a barrier. Yao Yong said snappily, "Quickly get up, there are still quite a few 4th-generation disciples on the island. If they were to see our sex-dignified puppet grandmaster lying on the ground without any care for his image, who knows how many disciples would have their eyeballs smashed, especially those female disciples. Among the 16 true spirit inheritances, you, Ji Xianxian, are known as the most handsome and outstanding. Don't disappoint them." These words were indeed effective. Ji Xianxian couldn't care less about the soreness in his body as he crawled up from the ground. He tidied up his clothes and looked around, only to discover that the startled disciples on the island were all looking up at the battle between Lu Ping and the blood azura that was chasing after him. No one had noticed him. The spirit that Ji Xianxian had just mustered immediately dissipated as he said, "Like I said, there's no place for us to stand out with this guy around. The number 1 in appearance really can't compare to the number 1 in strength." Du Feng saw that Ji Xianxian had fled to the jolting hibernation island in such a sorry state. It was obvious that there was an extremely important matter, but this fellow was rambling about without any proper business. Thus, Du Feng said coldly, "Speak!" Ji Xianxian was startled by Du Feng's cold shout. Only then did he put away his previous playful expression and said, "The Soundwave Island has been besieged by Mara and is in imminent danger. I originally came here to ask for reinforcements, but it seems that there's no need for that now." As he spoke, Ji Xianxian turned his gaze towards the battle between Lu Ping and the Blood Azura. Lu Ping's pair of flying swords struck the surface of the flywheel like raindrops. Although the flywheel could display the power of a spiritual treasure in the hands of the Blood Azura, the combination of the thin water Everflow sword could also compete with a spiritual treasure. Moreover, the pair of flying swords were currently in Lu Ping's hands. From the beginning, Lu Ping had used swordsmanship to entangle the Blood Azura's spiritual treasure. The two flying swords shot out more than 100,000 sword lights. Every 1,296 sword lights condensed into a sword dragon. A total of 100 sword dragons weaved a huge sword net in the sky, trapping the flywheel within. No matter how hard it tried, it was unable to break through the restraints of the sword net. In a moment of desperation, the Blood Azura wanted to personally tear apart the sword net, but was forced back by the sword chi that shot out from the sword net. Most of the Blood Azura's abilities were based on the spiritual treasure. Now that the spiritual treasure had been trapped by Lu Ping, the Blood Azura's own strength was only slightly stronger than an ordinary early Dharma adept. Although Lu Ping had also lost the thin water Everflow sword, Lu Ping himself had never admitted that he was a pure swordsman. Lu Ping opened his palm and 5 torrents formed in midair, entangling the Blood Azura. The Blood Azura obviously did not expect Lu Ping to be able to use such a powerful magical power so casually after using the magical power of the spiritual treasure that could trap it. At this time, it was obvious that it was panicking, but it still rubbed its hands together, and dozens of golden lights shot out in all directions, cutting through the 5 torrents of Lu Ping. However, once Lu Ping used it, it was often endless. The split torrents suddenly split again, and the sky full of drizzle pierced the body of the Blood Azura. This Blood Azura was a gold Azura, and a copper-colored light shield suddenly appeared all over its body. Although the art of traveling through clouds and summoning rain was a meticulous attack, it could not pierce through this protective light shield. However, what the Blood Azura did not see was that although the sky full of drizzle could not pierce through its protective spell, when the drizzle fell at its feet, it slowly formed a pool of water. At this time, the Blood Shura was already a little frightened. It had fought with human Dharma adepts several times, but when it came to early Dharma adepts, it was always successful. Even when it came to mid-Dharma adepts that were difficult to deal with, it was able to escape unscathed. But at this time, the person in front of it, just how many kinds of natural great magical power had he used? The Blood Azura was a little scared. An instinct made it realize that at this time, it seemed to have fallen into the trap of the person in front of it. When it looked down in a daze, it suddenly saw that the water under its feet did not fall because it was in midair. Instead, it accumulated more and more, forming a small lake in the sky. The danger in the Blood Azura's heart became more and more critical. Rays of Gung Jin essence dispersed from its body, and the flying wheel trapped in the sword net suddenly shook violently. It attacked in all directions in the sword net, smashing 4 or 5 sword dragons in a row and almost breaking out of the sword net. However, it was a little too late. Lu Ping raised both palms, and the lake in the sky suddenly rose up with a monstrous wave, crashing down on the Blood Azura's head with the force of a mountain. Blue Waves Technique. The Blood Azura dispelled its own Gung Jin essence as if it did not care for its life, trying to split the huge wave in front of it. However, it did not see Lu Ping behind the huge wave. His hands formed a few more spells, and then suddenly pushed. The originally monstrous wave suddenly rose by 30 feet, and the power contained in it was even greater. Pushing Waves Technique. It was a great spell recorded in the Art of Vast Sea. Although Lu Ping had refined a great spell talisman in the Avatar Cloud, he couldn't upgrade it into a great spell seed to form his natal great spell. Even so, the power of this auxiliary remarkable power was still not to be underestimated. The blood azure could no longer resist the power contained in the huge wave. Its whole body was slapped away by the huge wave, and the Gung-Jin shield on its body was also smashed into pieces. Die! There was a sudden shout. The blood azure who was slapped away did not have time to struggle to get up, and saw a huge light of the axe coming straight down from the sky. The blood azure only had time to let out a miserable howl, and then it stopped abruptly. The mountain-splitting axe came down from above, cutting the blood azure into two. Tiankong Laozi laughed at Lu Ping and said, "Young Lu, I'm sorry, martial uncle attacked halfway." Lu Ping smiled helplessly, but his expression suddenly changed, and he said, "Run!" The flywheel trapped in the sword net by Lu Ping suddenly went berserk, and the flywheel, which was originally a foot in size, was now fluctuating in size, appearing extremely unstable. This was a sign that it was about to explode. Old Ancestor Tian Kong cursed loudly. He saw that a companion spirit treasure that was in his hands was going to disappear again, but his feet didn't linger in the slightest. He returned to Jingzhi Island like a wisp of smoke. He had to prevent the aftermath of the meteor explosion from hurting the cultivators on the island. Lu Ping was even more depressed. He had originally wanted to use the Lilong wine cauldron to see if he could absorb the essence from the blood azure when he killed the blood azure. Although this was a gold azure, and the Gung-Jin essence could not be used by Lu Ping, it would be good as long as he could leave a few Gung-Jin pills behind. As for the companion spiritual treasure, the flywheel, Lu Ping was more open-minded. After the fall of the blood azure, it often depended on luck to keep this thing, and this luck would not come 9 out of 10 times. Chapter 1005. The fragments of the exploding flywheel danced in all directions. However, in front of Lu Ping, who had the cloud sail to protect him, the power of the meteor companion's spiritual treasure's meteor explosion was really nothing. Moreover, perhaps because Blood Shura's death was too sudden, the flywheel's meteor explosion was not complete. 3 larger fragments shot out in a row. Lu Ping was quick to react. The hundreds of fleeing sword jiaos circled around and retracted the 3 shards. But in the blink of an eye, more than a dozen sword jiaos were sliced into pieces by the 3 shards. Linglong spat out a golden pill. It was condensed from the dissipating golden hepta essence that Linglong had tried her best to collect. Swoosh! A dazzling light shot out from Jingzhi Island. Du Feng shot the flying sword in his hand straight into the battlefield. The golden hepta essence that was gradually thinning gradually showed signs of condensing into the flying sword in Du Feng's hand. Lu Ping could clearly sense that this trend was not too obvious with his divine telekinesis. However, the flying sword in Du Feng's hand was quite famous. It was already a spirit-nurturing magic treasure, and had extremely high potential for improvement. Lu Ping threw a fragment of the companion's spiritual treasure towards Du Feng's flying sword. Du Feng's eyes lit up when he saw the fragment. Although the fragment of the companion's spiritual treasure could only be regarded as a type of spiritual material, it could be regarded as an extremely rare and pure top-notch spiritual material in the cultivation world. It was very useful to Du Feng. At this time, Chu Hailan already knew that Tian Kong Laozu's evildoer was not directed at her, but at Blood Shura, who was chasing after Ji Xianxian. However, she was more or less on guard in the sect's territory. Unexpectedly, this kind of vigilance caused her to misjudge the situation. Her cultivation, which was originally concealed by the demon transformation bracelet, was automatically exposed. In the end, she was almost subdued by Tian Kong Laozu. Luckily, Chu Hailan's abilities weren't ordinary, which was why she managed to preserve her life under the attack of the mountain-splitting serpent. After that, she willingly entered the trapping formation of the waking hibernating island. Only then did Patriarch Tian Kong put his heart at ease. This was still the result of her identity, as the Jade Sea Spirit Serpent, which made Patriarch Tian Kong rather fearful. Patriarch Tian Kong, who had returned to Jingling Island, heard what Lu Ping said, and only then did he let Chu Hailan out. Chu Hailang immediately said his goodbyes and wanted to leave with Ai Shuyao. However, Lu Ping had already heard the news from Ji Xianxian about Hearing Waves Island. In his anxiety, he wanted to rush over to help. However, Lu Ping also knew that the fallen mystic realm was in a state of unrest at this time, so it was naturally not suitable for forefather Tian Kong to leave Jingzhi Island. Thus, Lu Ping turned his gaze to Chu Hailan. "What? I'm not going! I'm not going!" Chu Hailan shook her head like a rattled drum. She wanted to leave Jingzhi Island as soon as possible and rush back to her clan to pass on the news of her contact with the Heavenly Moon sect. Among the human sects, Chu Hailan always had a feeling that her life and death were not in her control. She did not want this feeling to remain with her. "How about I owe you a favor?" Lu Ping was also a little anxious. He had already received the news from Ji Xianxian. He did not know what had happened on Soundwave Island that attracted 3 Blood Azura and a group of Mara to attack. Ji Xianxian risked his life to ask for help and led one away. However, the remaining 2 and the hundreds of Mara under their command were enough to flatten the entire Soundwave Island. "Really?" Chu Hailan's face lit up. She knew that it was not easy to return a favor to a person like Lu Ping. Moreover, who could predict Lu Ping's future achievements? Lu Qiner carried Lu Ping and Chu Hailan in the direction of Soundwave Island. In a short distance flight, both Lu Ping and Chu Hailan had dozens of methods to surpass Lu Qiner. However, if it was a long distance flight, Lu Qiner had a natural advantage as a flying Yao cultivator. From Ji Xuanxuan's words, Mara's sudden attack on Soundwave Island seemed rather strange. However, Soundwave Island had been under the management of Qi Lianing and Yin Xianchu for the past few years. It was possible for them to resist the attack of this group of Mara for a short period of time. Moreover, Yin Xianchu had already pushed his cultivation to the edge of refining a spiritual object for the 3rd time. If it was not for the fact that he had no confidence in refining the 3 ice river hearts to achieve a 9th grade golden core, Yin Xianchu would have long since advanced to the peak of core forging. Even so, with Yin Xuanchu's elusive assassination methods, trying to assassinate a blood Shura was akin to courting death. However, it was not impossible to pin it down. "I hope they can hold out until I come to help." Lu Ping was deeply worried. Chu Hailan did not have such thoughts. She had only come to help out because of Lu Ping's favor. The life and death of the people on Soundwave Island had nothing to do with her. Away from Tiankong Laozu's vigilant gaze, Chu Hailan felt relaxed. Instead, she chatted incessantly with the flying Lu Qiner. Outside Soundwave Island, Yin Xianchu was bathed in blood. However, his expression was still cold and solemn, as if the injuries on his body did not belong to him. He held the Taixian thorn in his hand in a reverse grip. Drops of Kui water essence dripped from the thorn's tip, then evaporated into spiritual energy and dispersed in the air. Dozens of feet away, a blood Shura looked at the transparent hole in its arm in surprise. It did not expect that it would be injured by the human clan's minor repairs. This made it extremely angry, but at the same time, it also made it feel a little more afraid of the person in front of it. Yin Xianchu had been entangled with this blood Shura for more than 4 hours. At this moment, he was almost at his limit. Just now, he had almost died in the hands of this blood Shura. If it was not for the fact that his method of concealing his tracks was not low, Yin Xianchu would have died many times over. This guy's companion's spiritual treasure was actually invisible. How could it be the same as Lu Tianping's aqua sword? No, it was even more powerful than the aqua sword. If Yin Xuanchu's attainments in concealment were not low, he would have died many times over. The rumbling from afar made Yin Xianchu feel slightly relieved. At least until now, the other blood Shura had not broken the island's protective formation. Although Qi Lianing's cultivation had just broken through to the 8th layer of the core forging realm, his strength was not weaker than Ji Xuanxuan's. With the island's protective formation and the group of cultivators on the island, they should be able to resist, but they would not be able to hold on for long. Why hasn't that bastard Ji Xianxian returned yet? He couldn't have been killed by that golden Azura on the way, right? If that's the case, then there's no hope for today's battle. When the time comes, I'll just try my best to rescue Qi Lianying, and the others can only fend for themselves. Speaking of which, the relationship between Qi Lianying and Lu Tianping was unclear. Who knew if there would be any disturbances? Moreover, Qi Lianying herself was very strange. Her appearance had been changed, and her memory was also fragmented. However, her cultivation was closely related to Zhenling's direct disciple. It was said that she had been raised by Uncle Master Tianqin since she was young, but she had not become Uncle Master Tianqin's disciple. In that case, Uncle Master Tianqin would definitely not break the sex rules and teach her a direct disciple method. Yin Xianchu was suddenly shocked. How could he be distracted at such a moment of life and death? When he looked at the blood Shura in front of him, he saw that the blood Shura was also looking at Yin Xianchu and smiling coldly. The wound on his arm was still dripping with the blood of the blood Shura, but it was no longer the essence of Kui water, but ordinary water. Not good. Why did this fellow's supernatural power look like the art of deceiving the heavens and sea? Yin Xuanchu's intuition, trained from walking on the edge of life and death, told him that he was now at the moment of life and death. Yin Xianchu turned to the side and blocked with the Tai Xian thorn in his hand. With a crisp clang, the Tai Xian thorn that had just been repaired was cut open by the blood Shura's invisible spiritual treasure. Yin Xianchu did not care about the pain. This Tai Xian thorn was something that Lu Ping had entrusted to him to hand over to Qi Lianying. It was only because of the critical situation that Yin Xianchu had to restrain the blood Shura alone that Qi Lianying had temporarily given him the Tai Xian thorn. Although Yin Xianchu had blocked the blood Shura's invisible spiritual treasure and tried his best to dodge sideways, a huge force still hit his back without any warning. Yin Xianchu followed this force and abruptly flew forward for over 1,000 feet. He could no longer hold back the blood in his heart, and he directly spat out an arrow of blood 3 feet away. Then, it turned into a blood-colored ice cube that emitted a chilling aura and fell onto the surface of the sea. The blood Shura, laughing strangely, appeared where Yin Xianchu had been standing, and the previous illusion turned into a pool of water and fell from midair. Damn, it was exactly the same as the art of deceiving the heavens and sea. At this moment, a loud bang suddenly came from the direction of Soundwave Island in the distance, followed by shouts of killing. Yin Xuanchu's heart trembled. Oh no, the island's protective formation was broken. Yin Xianchu wanted to retreat. He had to rush back to Soundwave Island. At the very least, he had to rescue Qi Lianying. However, he had neglected the fact that he was heavily injured. How could he retreat just because he wanted to? Moreover, there was a blood Shura eyeing him covetously. At this moment, this blood Shura seemed to be even more anxious than he was. With a howl, it pounced towards Yin Xianchu. A strange force firmly bound Yin Xianchu in midair. Even if he wanted to hide himself, he would have to expend a great deal of energy to break through this restraint. If Yin Xianchu still had his strength, it would naturally not be a problem. However, how could he escape now that he was seriously injured? Yin Xianchu sighed. He knew that he could not escape, but he was not someone who would close his eyes and wait for death. His heart was already beating rapidly in his chest, waiting for the blood Shura to reach him to trigger a self-explosion. Howl! A strange howl suddenly cut through the sky. Yin Xianchu suddenly looked up and saw that a door had suddenly split open in front of him. A pair of familiar flying swords shot out from the door and slashed towards the void. Clang! A strange long sword appeared in front of Yin Xianchu for the first time. It was blocked by the thin flowing water sword in front of Yin Xianchu. At the same time, that strange howl also seemed to cut through the restraints of space and stab towards the back of Blood Shura's head. Blood Shura looked extremely panicked at this moment. He stood there, unable to move, and the expression on his face had already frozen. Splash! The nether water sword flashed and disappeared, but it split open a pool of water. Dozens of feet away, Blood Shura revealed itself and was about to retreat quickly. However, its appearance did not seem to be unexpected by those who had rushed to help. A white light had already shot towards it the moment it appeared. Blood Shura could not dodge in time. The white light sank into its body and seemed to freeze everything in its body. Kill! A small person suddenly appeared in front of Blood Shura's face. The azure willow sword on its back was pulled out and stabbed directly into Blood Shura's head through its eyes. Chapter 1006. Yin Xianchu had narrowly escaped death. The thin water-flowing sword in front of him was shaking its head and wagging its tail, as if it was greeting him. Yin Xianchu spat out a mouthful of blood and looked around, but still did not see Lu Ping appear. He could not help but curse and said, "It's actually teleporting the sword through space. Isn't this a space magic that only mid-Dharma adepts can control?" Immediately after, Yin Xuanchu's gaze turned to the small figure in the distance that was about a foot tall, but looked exactly like Lu Ping. It was Lu Ping's avatar, Lu Xiaoping. Lu Xiaoping obviously understood what Yin Xianchu had said earlier. He made a face at Yin Xianchu and then sheathed the willow sword in his hand into the scabbard on his back. He put his left thumb and index finger in his mouth and whistled loudly. The thin water-flowing sword vibrated and immediately circled around in the direction that Lu Xiaoping's right hand was pointing in. Yin Xuanchu's heart suddenly jumped. Could it be that there was an opponent hiding nearby? But he saw that Lu Xiaoping suddenly jump up, and when he landed, he happened to be standing on the thin water-flowing sword. At this moment, the two swords formed a pincer attack from both sides. With a clang, the strange invisible flying sword that Yin Xianchu had seen earlier was once again hit by the thin water-flowing sword. But immediately after, it hit itself again. Yin Xuanchu's face was filled with joy. It was actually that invisible companion's spiritual treasure. Yin Xianchu did not care about his own injuries and was about to go forward to help. Unexpectedly, he saw two rays of green light suddenly shoot out from Lu Xiaoping's eyes. In an instant, he found the location of the hidden sword and leaped forward, his hands seeming to grab onto something. The hidden sword revealed itself again, but this time, it was grabbed by the hilt by Lu Xiaoping's small hands. The hidden sword was carried by the hidden sword in midair, and the little person swayed as he hung on the hilt. At this time, the thin water-flowing sword also came forward to attack again, to completely suppress the hidden sword. Just as Lu Xiaoping and the dual flying swords worked together to suppress the invisible flying sword, the sky above the place where the water Shura had fallen once again split open. A three-legged wine cauldron rushed out of the opening. A whirlpool of light appeared at the mouth of the cauldron, and the wine cauldron swallowed more than half of the dissipating essence of the fallen water Shura. A little girl suddenly leaned against the side of the wine cauldron and peeked her head out. She smiled at Yin Xianchu and shook her head. Then, the wine cauldron slowly turned and once again entered the pitch-black spatial crack and disappeared. The spatial crack also slowly closed up. On Soundwave Island, just as Yin Xianchu had been injured by the blood Shura and was on the verge of death, the island-protecting formation that Qi Lianing was presiding over was finally broken by the attacks of another blood Shura and more than 100 Mara. Qi Lianing knew that the island was only able to hold on until now because of the power of the island's protective formation. Although there were nearly 10 core forging realm cultivators on the island, most of them were at the early and mid-stage core forging realm. In the face of the White Jade Devil led by Blood Azura, Soundwave Island was almost defenseless. Why would this group of Mara take a fancy to a small island like Soundwave Island? A great Shura rushed towards Qi Lianing, the companion magic treasure in its hand carrying the power of a forward charge towards Qi Lianing. Qi Lianing snorted coldly. Her sleeves stirred up a curtain in midair. The companion magic treasure was hidden layer by layer under the curtain. In the end, the power of the magic treasure was dissolved. Then, the pair of sleeves flipped up, forming a curtain wall that enveloped the great Shura. The great Shura rushed left and right, but the magic treasure in its hand was useless no matter where it hit. It could not break through the curtain wall. The great Shura had never encountered such a strange situation. For a moment, it was very anxious. It raised its head and roared, beginning to call for help from its companions. Qi Lianying's face was as gloomy as frost. A pair of short swords appeared in her hands along her sleeves, and then she rushed into the curtain wall with them. The sleeve sword was a magic power that Qi Lianying had practiced. Now, she had used this magic power in such a way that it was as if she was in a maze. A moment later, a scream came from within the curtain wall. The great Shura, who was equivalent to a late core forging cultivator, had died under Qi Lianying's two swords. The curtain wall turned back into two sleeves, shrinking back into Qi Lianying's sleeves and disappearing. When she looked up, the entire Soundwave Island was already filled with the sounds of fighting, and from time to time, the screams of Soundwave Island's cultivators could be heard. Although Soundwave Island was not her foundation, it was the result of decades of hard work. It was also something she had entrusted to him. Now that it was so easily destroyed, she could not help but feel sad. But she also knew that there was nothing she could do now. Even if she could kill a great Shura, there were a total of 20 to 30 great Shuras besieging Soundwave Island, not to mention that there was still a blood Shura that had yet to make a move. Escape, only by escaping would there be hope. If all else failed, she could only go to the North Sea to find him. Xi Xianxian and the others had already mentioned Lu Ping to her several times. She knew that he was now at the Dharma manifestation stage and was a rising star in the cultivation world. Lu Ping had once promised to bring her to the North Sea to unravel the mysteries of her life. She had already guessed that this might not be a difficult matter, because no matter if it was Yin Xianchu or Ji Xianxian, when they saw the spell she cast, they both revealed the same look of surprise. However, when they heard Mei Tianqin's name, the two of them simultaneously chose to remain silent. It was as if the two of them were also confused, as if they knew something, but they weren't too clear about it. They were even more unwilling to touch upon such a taboo topic. A scream came from afar, causing Qi Lianying to stop in her tracks. More than 100 feet away, a cute teenage girl was lying on the ground. The magic tool in her hand was already scattered, and Ashura was laughing sinisterly as it pounced towards the girl. Qi Lianying was furious, and the short sword in her hand shot towards the Shura. Unexpectedly, it was blocked by an ice wall that suddenly rose midway. An ice Shura walked down from the ice wall, and behind it, ice owls rose and flew towards Qi Lianying. Qi Lianying was anxious to save the girl, but the dozens of ice owls suddenly exploded when they flew in front of Qi Lianying. Countless ice needles blocked all of Qi Lianying's escape routes. Qi Lianying had no choice but to spin her sleeves into a whirlpool, sucking in all the ice needles that filled the sky and crushing them. But at this time, there was no time to save the little girl. She directed all her anger towards the ice Shura, but only then did she realize that she had already fallen into the encirclement of 4 great Shuras. Clearly, they were companions that the Shura that had died in Qi Lianying's hands had lured over. Qi Lianying's heart sank even more. Given the situation before her, even whether she could escape was a problem, let alone save the girl. At this time, a long cry suddenly sounded from the sky. Qi Lianying looked up, and saw a majestic blue phoenix suddenly swooping down from the sky. The Shura that had bent down to bite the girl's neck was instantly torn to pieces by the blue phoenix's sharp claws. "Sister Qiner!" The girl cried tears of joy, and reached out to the blue phoenix that was circling again. "It's Lu Qiner, he's here!" Qi Lianying was momentarily distracted, and a wood Shura behind her took the opportunity to whip her back. Smack! A bloody gash directly reflected on Qi Lianying's back. Qi Lianying grunted in pain, and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. She turned around and shot the short sword in her hand at the wood Shura behind her. The other 3 Shuras went forward to receive her, and they attacked Qi Lianying from different directions. For a moment, Qi Lianying was surrounded by danger. A cloud suddenly fell from the sky, and then turned into a golden rock, which pounced towards Qi Lianing. Then, Qi Lianing seemed to be wearing a colorful robe made of auspicious clouds, and a rock that was spreading its wings and about to take flight looked very lifelike. The combined attacks of the Shuras landed on Qi Lianing, but only a few of the auspicious clouds imprinted on the robe were scattered. As the clouds gathered and dispersed, Qi Lianing was not injured at all. Qi Lianing was overjoyed. After Ji Xianxian came to Soundwave Island, she had asked about Lu Ping's recent situation in detail and learned that Lu Ping had two great spiritual treasures, one of which was the Golden Rock Cloud Sail. The Golden Rock auspicious cloud robe that she was wearing now was obviously transformed from that cloud sail. Without any worries, Qi Lianing did not care about the continuous attacks from the other three Shuras. The short sword in her hand was hidden in her sleeves, and she only cared about the wood Shura that had whipped her just now. Wu Yan was now also a core forging cultivator, but he knew his own ability. It was already a blessing from the heavens to be able to advance to the core forging stage and have an extra 200 to 300 years of lifespan. In this life, his cultivation would probably not be able to advance even an inch. However, at this time, looking at the 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras in front of him, he was a little envious of Hongying and Yi Buki. Hongying was currently preparing to condense a heaven and earth spiritual object to advance to the mid-stage of the core forging stage, while Yi Buki was already at the 4th stage of the core forging stage. He was almost the strongest in the entire island apart from the 3 vice island lords. If he had the cultivation of the 2 of them, he could fight the current situation head-on. Even if he failed, he would have a chance to escape. However, facing the siege of 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras that were only equivalent to the late stage of the blood condensation realm, Wu Yan actually felt powerless. His death was not to be regretted, but behind him was the treasure vault of Soundwave Island. All the resources accumulated over the years were in this treasure vault. More importantly, there was Wu Yan's own pair of children in the treasure vault. Deputy Island Master Ji had once said that his son and daughter were qualified to enter Zhenling sect. In the future, they might even have the chance to become Zhenling sect's inner sect disciples. He, Wu Yan, had already reached the end of his life, but no matter what, he had to fight for his son and daughter. The 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras obviously did not expect that although the human cultivator in front of them was only at the core forging stage, he was actually like a silver spear tip made of wax. He could not even withstand the siege of several people. Although the door behind this human cultivator was sealed, the aura inside could not be hidden from the Shuras who were born to devour spirits. Faced with the temptation, they could no longer resist and began to move restlessly. Wu Yan tightly held a medicinal pestle in his hand. This was a magic treasure that his master had given to Hongying. Now that Hongying had no use for it, he gave it to him. This was the only life-saving item on him. The 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras shouted and rushed towards him. Wu Yan's eyes were bloodshot. The feeling of impending death forced him to howl loudly to boost his courage. The medicinal pestle in his hand crazily smashed towards the minor repairs Luoluan. The 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras suddenly howled in horror. Wu Yan did not understand what was going on, so he used the pestle to smash the heads of the 7 or 8 minor repairs Luoluan in the blink of an eye. Wu Yan leaned on the medicinal pestle and bent over on the ground, panting heavily. He looked in disbelief at the 7 or 8 Shuras that he had smashed. Only then did he suddenly realize, why didn't those Shuras fight back? Chapter 1007. The same scene was playing out all over Soundwave Island. Hongying was being beaten by a great Shura and was running away like a rat. Just as he was about to escape, he suddenly found that the vines in the surrounding forest were wrapping around the great Shura's body from all directions. This great Shura was also a wood Shura. Seeing this, it activated its innate magical power, wanting to fight the hidden enemy. However, it suddenly found that the grass, trees, bamboo, and vines that it used to command like an arm were not listening to it at this time. It seemed that there was a higher level of power above it, causing the grass, trees, bamboo, and vines to be dismissive of its innate magical power. The great Azura was quickly entangled. At this time, it already knew fear. It wanted to use the wood escape technique to escape, but at this time, it seemed that the wood escape technique had lost its effect. This time, it really panicked. By now, how could Honging not know that someone was secretly helping him? One of the magic treasures in his hand flew out and struck the wood Azura. The wood Azura struggled with all its might and howled in despair, but none of that could save its fate. Honging killed the wood Shura in one blow. He quickly wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead and said to the surrounding people, "May I ask who helped me? Honging is very grateful." A little girl stuck her head out from behind a huge tree and coldly glanced at the red eagle. Then, she hid behind the huge tree again. The red eagle stared blankly for a moment, only seeing a blooming pink peach blossom on the little girl's head. Yubuki was now an expert at the 5th level of the core forging realm. His aptitude was far above that of Wu Yan and Hong Ying. Later, he was appreciated by the deputy island master, In Xian Chu, who gave him some pointers. Naturally, his cultivation level rose all the way. However, 3 of his 5 sworn brothers failed to make it through the bottleneck of condensing their gold cores and eventually died of old age. The other 2 managed to condense their gold cores with the help of Yu Jianrui and In Xianchu, but their strength was only slightly stronger than Wu Yan's. It was wishful thinking for them to advance further. After the chaotic battle on the island, he didn't know where they were now or if they were still alive. At this moment, a great Shura suddenly rushed over from the opposite side. Yubuki was shocked. Just now, he had escaped from a great Shura equivalent to the late core forging realm, but the strength of the great Shura in front of him was obviously above that of the previous one. Yubuki's heart could not help but sink. He crossed the 2 water-splitting spikes in his hands. He gritted his teeth and thought to himself, "I'm going all out." Then, he used all his strength to charge at the Azura in front of him. The great Shura looked very anxious. A crescent moon saber appeared in his hand and suddenly slashed toward Yubuki, who was rushing over. With a crisp clang, the 2 water-splitting thorns were smashed away. They penetrated through several huge trees before they could offset this huge force. Finally, they stopped on a huge tree that was 3 feet thick. Yubuki, on the other hand, was thrown several feet back by this huge force. He spat out a mouthful of blood in midair. At this time, Yubuki suddenly realized that the great Shura in front of him was not coming for him. Looking at its panic, it seemed to be running for its life. Yubuki, who was in midair, tried his best to look behind the great Shura, but he just happened to see a teenage boy holding a halberd that was far taller than him chasing from the forest behind him. Taking advantage of the moment when the great Shura was blocked by Yubuki, the boy caught up to it and slashed at the great Shura's back with his halberd. The late core forging realm. Yubuki looked at the boy in front of him. When the boy slashed with his halberd, the strength of the late core forging realm burst out from all over his body. His eyes bulged and he even forgot about the injuries on his body. Madame Du was looking for her daughter. With the help of Lu Ping, although she had temporarily recovered her core forging realm cultivation, it was still a body that she had taken over. She could forget about her original late core forging realm cultivation. Moreover, she could not use many of the Fox clan's techniques in the present. However, what worried her the most was her daughter, Du Jiawei. Du Jiawei was Du Jiao's half-sister. Du Jiawei was now in the late blood condensation realm. Because she had the Fox clan's bloodline, she could take human form at the late blood condensation realm. Du Jiawei became extremely rebellious after she took human form. In addition, Qi Lianying was very fond of Du Jiawei. Under her indulgence, the entire Listening Waves Island treated Du Jiawei like a princess. This further encouraged Du Jiawei to be unruly and willful. She even began to ignore Madame Du's words. This situation only changed after Vice Island Lord Ji Xianxian arrived. Ever since the little girl met Ji Xianxian, she had been pestering Ji Xianxian to practice puppet techniques. That day, when Mara besieged Listening Waves Island, Ji Xianxian took the risk to go to Jingzhi Island. The little girl refused to let him go. In the end, Ji Xianxian could only temporarily restrain her and leave. After the little girl broke free from the restriction, she disappeared. What Madame Du was most afraid of was that the little girl would recklessly rush out of the island to find Ji Xianxian. Madame Du was anxious to find her daughter, so she did not notice the abnormality that happened when she passed through the forest on the island. By the time she realized that something was wrong, several Azuras had emerged from the trees and the ground, surrounding her. Madame Du was greatly shocked. Her 10 fingers grew long nails, and she brought out a horsetail whisk from her storage magic artifact. The horsetail whisk was somewhat peculiar. It was fluffy like a fox's tail. Truth be told, this horsetail whisk was a magic treasure forged from the tail of Madame Du's fleshly body after she had taken over the body. Madame Du's strength was at most at the early stage of core forging. Even though she had the experience of being at the late stage of core forging, it could only help her endure a little longer under the siege of Mara. Even so, Madame Du was still surrounded by a few Mara and was covered in wounds. The dripping blood further fueled Mara's rage. Soon Madame Du suffered another heavy injury. Seeing that Madame Du was about to die here, a great Azura pounced towards Madame Du with a sinister smile. However, it suddenly tilted its neck back and used its hands to grab at the area below its neck. A rope had been strangled there at some point. The great Azura's body that was leaning forward suddenly flew backwards, and its head was separated midway. Then, there was an explosion in the air, and a whipped shadow swept over once again. A devil Azura could not dodge in time and was whipped out of the black mist. It fell to the ground and twitched a few times before it could no longer move. Before Madame Du fainted, she saw a girl who was not much younger than her daughter holding a long whip in her hand. Every time the whip lashed out, Amara would be whipped away. The pair of short daggers in Lu Linger's hands danced up and down, but they only protected her whole body. Meanwhile, she was using her Ice-Soul Divine ability. Every time she launched an attack in the air, a Shura or Shioma would be frozen into an ice sculpture. Every time an ice sculpture was formed, Lu Linger would chuckle proudly. But once a Shura dodged her Ice-Soul Divine ability, he would inevitably be chased by Lu Linger, who was full of anger. In the end, he would not stop until he was turned into an ice sculpture. Linger, father wants you to find Ending. Why haven't you gone yet? Lu Bai supported the unconscious Madame Du and walked out of the woods. But when she saw Lu Linger playing happily, her face immediately sank and she shouted unhappily. Although Lu Linger was naughty, she was very respectful towards her elder sister Lu Bai. Hearing this, she was very unhappy and said, I know. After that, she casually smashed a frozen devil Azura into pieces, then turned into a white light and disappeared. Yu Jiangrui no longer planned to escape. These years of comfortable life on Soundwave Island had made Yu Jiangrui no longer want to live a wandering life. More importantly, his lifespan was running out. Although Yu Jiangrui had reached the core forging realm through Lu Ping's core transferring secret technique, it was only a pseudo-core forging realm cultivation base. It couldn't even compare to Wu Yan's golden core, which was condensed using a secret technique. Yu Jiangrui's golden core wasn't even his. Although he was lucky enough to extend his lifespan by more than 100 years, the golden core in his heart space was gradually aging because it was not nourished by true essence. It was afraid that in a few decades it would collapse. At that time, his life would also come to an end. Yu Jiangrui looked at his disciple who was running away with him in front of him. He laughed at himself. Not long ago, he was a pseudo-core forging stage cultivator, but now he had to run away with a late blood condensation cultivator. Tower, go by yourself. Master can't walk anymore, Sima Tao said without turning his head. Master, we are about to escape. As long as we leave Soundwave Island, these Mara may not chase us. Yu Jiangrui cast a glance at the few devils who had quietly caught up to him from afar and said with a smile, Actually, my lifespan has come to an end. Fortunately, you've already inherited all of my alchemy skills, so I can rest assured now. Sima Tao suddenly felt that there was something wrong with his master's words. Just as he was about to turn around, he felt a huge force pushing him from behind. Sima Tao flew forward involuntarily. Sima Tao panicked. He wanted to stabilize his body in midair, but he found that the magic power around his body seemed to be confined and could not be used for the time being. When he turned his body with all his might, he saw that Yu Jiangrui had already rushed toward the few devil luos who were chasing behind him. A storage bag fell from the sky and smashed into Sima Tao the moment he landed. Sima Tao recognized this storage bag. It belonged to his master, Yu Jiangrui. Sima Tao grabbed the storage bag and dashed in Yu Jiangrui's direction. However, he suddenly saw his teacher's body turning into a ball of sparks, charging into the midst of a few devil luos and exploding. A wave of heat spread out, and even though Sima Tao was close to the opportunity, he was still sent flying. Master! Sima Tao struggled to get up from the ground, but he saw a few more Asuras rushing towards him from another direction. Sima Tao's hands ignited with 2 balls of fire. He howled and rushed towards Mara. He didn't even care about the accompanying celestial devices that had been thrown out of the hands of the Asuras. A huge tortoise shield suddenly appeared above Sima Tao, blocking all the incoming magic treasures. Then, several sharp blades suddenly extended out from the tortoise shield. The blades buzzed as they spun, slashing at the Maras that were charging at them. The few Mara tried their best to block the attacks, but to no avail. Even their celestial devices were sliced in half at the waist. Shao Sima, do you still remember me? A tall, good-natured young man appeared in front of Shao Sima and chuckled. Chapter 1008. Chu Hailan saw with his own eyes that Lu Ping had sent the thin-streamed sword, the cloud sail, and the Linglong wine cauldron through the air, using a technique that only mid-Dharma adepts could master. Also, a foot-long puppet had flown out with them? No, that was a body double. Chu Hailan, who was born and raised in the Green Sea Snakes, was naturally knowledgeable and had heard of the body double technique. It was said that this was one of the highest achievements in the art of puppetry. However, even after Lu Ping had sent out all these powerful treasures and spirit treasures, the blood Shura in front of him was still unable to gain any advantage over Lu Ping. Moreover, as the battle dragged on, Lu Ping seemed to be gaining the upper hand. What kind of monster was this? Even Chu Haitian, the strongest of the 3 generations of Green Sea Snakes adepts, was only as strong as this when he was at the early Dharma stage. The blood Asura was a fire Asura that was rarely seen in the overseas cultivation world. It looked like a fire spirit. Wherever it passed, sparks would be left behind, even in the air. It was as if it was going to burn through the space. This fire Shura's innate magical powers were extremely powerful. Since the start of the battle, Lu Ping had seen the fire Shura use at least 5 types of flames. Among them, there were 3 heaven-level spiritual fires and 2 high-level mystical fires, not to mention the other low-level fires. Both Lu Ping and Chu Hailan's eyes lit up as they watched. Even the 7 treasures Thunder Calabash seemed to have sensed something and jumped up and down in the core space. It only calmed down after being slapped hard by the Dharma power of the dragon. Every blood Shura would have an extremely powerful accompanying spiritual treasure after becoming a blood Shura. These accompanying spiritual treasures came in all shapes and sizes, and their effects were often different. The accompanying spiritual treasure in the fire Shura's hand was obviously a treasure that could simulate all kinds of fire seeds in the world. However, Lu Ping's methods were not inferior to this fire Shura's. Although he did not have any handy spiritual treasures or treasures, Lu Ping could use his own magical powers to fight evenly with this fire Shura. It was not that Chu Hailan was unwilling to come out and help Lu Ping, but when Lu Ping arrived at Soundwave Island and found this strange fire Shura, he had the idea of capturing and killing it. He wanted Chu Hailan to hide in the side and block the Shura's path when it was ready to escape. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, Chu Hailan did not appear on the battlefield, but hid in the void, ready to strike at any time. When Chu Hailan saw that Lu Ping had used up all his magic treasures and fought with this Shura with his bare hands, she secretly thought that it was still uncertain whether this guy could subdue this Shura, but he actually dared to ask her to watch from the side. However, the result gave Chu Hailan a new understanding of Lu Ping's strength. The battle between water and fire was originally a violent collision. The sea of fire and the monstrous waves fought in midair, dyeing the entire sky half fiery red and half eerie blue. The explosive roar was deafening. The three powerful great Shuras who were originally by the Blood Shura's side were shaken by the battle between the two, let alone coming forward to help. Lu Ping was greatly surprised. The fire Shura in front of him was clearly far more powerful than ordinary Blood Shura. The spiritual treasure in its hand was always wrapped in flames, and its original appearance could not be seen. However, the type of flames was constantly changing. Even if Lu Ping used several kinds of magic, he still could not do anything to it. At this time, the fire Shura also felt that something was wrong. There had been no news of its two companions until now. After it broke the island's protective formation, a group of subordinates rushed to the island, but their breaths disappeared one by one from its divine thoughts. However, what it was most afraid of was the human practitioner in front of it. His cultivation was unfathomable, and he had endless magic skills. As a rare fire Shura in the overseas Mara tribe, it occupied a very special position in the Mara tribe with its own strength. Ordinary Mara of the same level were no match for it at all. However, the person in front of it was able to fight it so well, and as time went on, the fire Shura even felt a sense of weakness. However, the person in front of it was still like a raging sea, and the magic skills and spells in his hands were coming at it one after another. At this time, the fire Shura had the intention to retreat, but the opposite Lu Ping obviously would not let it go so easily. Lu Ping first raised his head to create a monstrous spirit wave, and then pushed with one hand. With the help of the blue wave's skill, the half of the blue in the sky expanded rapidly, and pressed on the other half of the fiery red sky. Not to be outdone, the fire Shura suddenly lit up a little spark in the void, and then the sparks counterattacked the blue wave's skill with the momentum of a prairie fire. The sky was alternating between red and blue, and a large amount of water vapor was evaporating, and then condensed into clouds higher in the sky. The clouds contained boundless spirit wave, and then turned into rain, falling down in the sunny sky. However, it benefited the fish, shrimp, seaweed in the sea, and the trees and flowers on the island. Lu Ping pushed forward with one hand and cast the art of cloud and rain, turning the fine rain into an offensive attack. Then, he saw a fire tiger roaring through the dense rain and pouncing on Lu Ping. Lu Ping's eyes widened in surprise as he saw a fire tiger pouncing through the rain. Lu Ping could not dodge in time, and was pounced on by the fire tiger. His whole body was turned into water in the fire tiger's mouth, and then evaporated. Seeing that things were not going well, the fire Shura turned into a ball of fire and rushed toward the fire tiger. At this time, in the sea of fire formed by the fire Shura, a space door suddenly cracked open. The space that was about to collapse from the fire Shura's innate fire magic could be forcibly torn open by Lu Ping. Both the fire Shura and Chu Hailan, who was hiding at the side, were shocked. Lu Ping stepped out of the space door, and the surrounding flames licked at Lu Ping, but an invisible force spread out with Lu Ping as the center, clearing a distance of 10 feet. The fire Shura ran all the way through the rain curtain formed by the art of traveling through clouds and summoning rain. Its whole body looked a little weak, but when it stepped on the fire tiger, its whole body began to emit green flames again. Suddenly refreshed, it turned around and pounced on Lu Ping again. However, Lu Ping smiled, and clenched his open palm tightly. The dark blue field created by Lu Ping, where the fire Shura stood, suddenly rolled up waves, and each wave turned into a water sword, stabbing at the fire Shura from all directions. Thousand Snow Sword Art. The fire Shura looked a little panicked at this time. It had already seen that this was a trap set by Lu Ping, whose original purpose was to separate it from the companion's spiritual treasure that had turned into the fire tiger. That was why it rushed into the water field created by Lu Ping to meet the fire tiger. However, when it got in, it found that it was another trap. But after meeting the companion's spiritual treasure, the fire Shura was obviously much calmer. The fire tiger suddenly stood up and dismembered in midair, turning into countless fire ravens, fire scorpions, fire cicadas, fire rats, fire wolves, and fire sparrows. They rushed towards the water swords coming from all directions, wiping out the great magic sword art formed by flowing water in an instant. The fire Shura turned over and wanted to use the same method to fight back against Lu Ping, who had entered the fire field it had created earlier, but found that the flame fortress it had painstakingly created had long been extinguished by the art of traveling through clouds and summoning rain above Lu Ping's head. The fire Shura was shocked and was about to turn around and retreat, but it noticed that Lu Ping seemed to be moving again. When it turned around, it saw clouds of water gathering from all directions, with Lu Ping as the center, slowly forming a bigger and bigger cloud. The cloud stretched longer and longer until it entered the sea.